good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
So there's this band I like. They're called Valley Maker. They make what I tend to call spectral folk. It's rhythmic, it's reverby, it's kind of ghostly. Lyrically, the songs they're very thoughtful, very reflective. If you look at Valley Maker's Spotify, you'll see that they have 3 full-length LPs. They're all very good, but none of them are my favorite Valley Maker LP. My favorite Valley Maker record was made by the lead singer and songwriter, his name's Austin Crane, when he was still in college. It's self-titled. It was his thesis project, actually. It's, as you might expect, much more lo-fi than the later releases. Lots of guitar, a little percussion, some pretty backing vocals. It's also a concept album about the Book of Genesis. I found it on the band's Bandcamp page back in 2010 or so, when it was still their only release. And since I've got big sloppy Jesus issues, I was deeply in love with it. I'm still in love with it. It's probably the vinyl record I play the most in my house. And whenever I see Valley Maker, I cross my fingers that he'll play something from it. But he usually doesn't. One of the last times I saw them, though, he played its closing track, but not before explaining the concept behind the album with a laugh and a bit of a shrug. He seemed kind of embarrassed by it. It's not that I don't think he's proud of it. It's more like he can't really remember the person who made it. And that I can understand. It represents a different time, a different mindset, a different approach to creativity. It doesn't matter how good it is. Like, anybody who's been making shit for a long time will cringe when they look back on the work they made when they were much, much younger. Lord knows I do. I'm sure my cohorts on this episode feel similarly. All of this is to say that I imagine the Bachman books for King, outside of Thinner and Regulators, are the sort of same to him as that self-titled album is to Austin. It's King, but it's an unrefined King. It's a King who's all anger and exposed nerves. And King, I think, likes the distance his pseudonym puts between him and those stories, which may as well have been written by someone else entirely. Not intentionally, but because King was still a writer divided. As you'll see in this episode about Blaze, a trunk novel published under the Bachman name, and the Bachman episodes will be publishing on our Patreon later this month, King, like Austin of Valley Maker, will still revisit that old work, but he can only do so with a lot of context and a kind of acknowledgement of how much he's changed since then. So yeah, I want to expand on these ideas more later this month, when we are going to rank all the Bachman books, and we're going to offer sort of a Bachman primer, kind of the A to Z of Richard Bachman. And yeah, I think that there's a lot to unpack here that goes beyond, I think, our initial perceptions about what separates Stephen King and Richard Bachman. But for now, it's all about Blaze being Blaze. So who's with me? Dan Caffrey, say hello, introduce yourself, and tell me, have you read Blaze before?
This is Dan. I was going to say just Blaze being Blaze Caffrey, because it's not a joke we made up. It's from something that it's the only thing I can think of when I hear the word Blaze. There's also an Ethan Hawke directed movie called Blaze about an outsider country artist whose name is Blaze also. That's called Blaze. And it's the only thing I can think of. I like that movie quite a bit, but I cannot watch it without just thinking of just Blaze being Blaze. Anyway, Dan, just Blaze being Blaze Caffrey. I read this book, as I've mentioned before, the summer that my wife was gone, and she challenged me to read the 14 Stephen King novels that I hadn't read that summer, and Blaze was one of them. And honestly, I knew nothing about it before I read it, and other than that, it was a Bachman book. And I have always heralded this novel. I feel like it's weirdly the Bachman novel that gets discussed the least, which is strange, because I'll just say it right now, it's by far and away my favorite Bachman book, even more so than The Long Walk. I don't know any of y'all's feelings on it, so we'll see
Let's
as
go.
the episode. Yeah, we'll see the episode as it goes on. But yeah, I loved it then. I loved the reread. I actually liked the reread even more of it. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this book today. Whenever anyone asks what's an underrated Stephen King book, what's maybe a more obscure one that's not a big brick of a novel like The Stand or It or whatever else, a non-famous King novel, which is the one I should read, and I always recommend Blaze. I've never followed up with any of those people on whether my recommendation was good or not. Maybe they hated it.
They never spoke to me again.
I could easily see someone hating this book. I can see it being a polarizing novel too. But yeah, super excited to talk about it today. So yeah, let's just keep on going.
Have you been on any other Bachman episodes, Dan?
I want to say just The Long Walk, I think.
Okay.
I don't even think I was on Roadwork, despite maybe Rage. Maybe I was on Rage. I definitely wasn't on Thinner.
I think all of us were on Rage.
Yeah,
like,
I think
that was an early one.
Yeah, but I definitely was not on Roadwork because I would have talked about the champagne pop, which other people did for me. Or was I? I don't fucking remember. Yeah, not definitely not all of them. I know I was not on Thinner. I know I was not on Regulators. And I was not on Running Man. So
what are your thoughts on Bachman in general? Since we haven't really gotten that perspective from you as much.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm like halvesies in on Bachman. I think The Long Walk and Blaze are two of King's best novels, Bachman or otherwise. I think Thinner is kind of the epitome of Bachman, right? Because the whole thing, I don't know, it's funny because I feel like the thing they say is, oh, Bachman's supposed to be like the George Stark of King, like the twisted King, right? I don't think Bachman novels are that much more twisted or pessimistic even than King books. I will say this, I think some of his other ones are trying to fit more into the thriller crime category, and I think Blaze does that the best out of all of them. It feels the most it feels the most of what Bachman is actually supposed to be, if that makes sense to me. And I think that makes sense. I think the reason for that is because, as I'm sure you'll go into in history, is because it's taking pages that were written under the Bachman pseudonym back in the day, but it's filtering them through King's modern perspective. So I feel like he's able to play into the Bachman alias a little bit more here, rather than just slapping the name on books that he maybe thinks aren't as worthy or aren't in his usual wheelhouse. Like, he feels very self-aware of who Bachman is here and catering to that. So
I think that's very true. And I think that's really what distinguishes Blaze from all the others, is that this is the only Bachman book that he rewrote after, you know what I mean? Like, having sat with the idea of what this pseudonym is and what it represents for readers. Like, because Regulators was self-consciously written as a Bachman book, and Thinner he's even acknowledged that's a Stephen King book and not really a Bachman book. But Blaze is the one that he actually reworked. And I think, you know, as, like, you're right, like, self-aware of what is the Bachman brand. But the thing is, and I agree with you, and I think we're not gonna go super deep on that particular aspect of, like, what is a Bachman book too deep in this episode, because I want to save that for the later ones. But I do think that the general perceptions, the sort of log line of what is a Bachman book, I don't think that it's that simple, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah.
I also think that it's kind of funny because he's had the Hodges trilogy, he's had all these Holly books, he's had the Colorado Kid. I haven't read Later or Billy Summers, which is also a crime thing. Those are two books I haven't read, but I feel like those were all kind of marketed as, oh, it's King's hard-boiled crime stretch. And I actually don't think some of those books are quite hard-boiled crime. He even says in this intro here that the Colorado Kid was like soft-boiled, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Blaze is actually his best example of what a fast-paced, hard-boiled crime novel looks like. But it's never in that discussion, though. I feel like when people discuss the Hodges trilogy, when they discuss Holly Gibney, when they discuss Colorado Kid, Blaze never comes up. And that's interesting to me because I feel like it's like the epitome of the King crime novel, the King hard-boiled crime novel, at least. I'm
just going to, like, jump in, and this is Rockin' Randall. And I just feel like it's worth it to say, like, my experience, this is my first time ever reading this book. And the reason I'm introducing myself now is just because I want to pivot off that and say I had no idea this was a crime novel. Like, this, for as steeped in Stephen King as I am, in that this has been a major part of my life for many years. Grew up reading all the books. You know, coming into this podcast, I had maybe, like, I could count on one hand, I think, how many books I hadn't read. Well, at least full-length books. And I always thought Blaze was like a horror novel. I never, ever, ever realized it was a crime novel until I started reading it. And that to me is like, I just always had that perception. Like I've never misjudged what a King book is that I didn't know before. And that was kind of a jarring thing for me. So I don't know. I think that speaks perhaps to I don't think a lot of people have read this book. So it's like, I think in the King canon, this one might even be less read than something like Colorado Kid, which is really interesting. Jen, say hello and tell us about your Blaze experience.
Hey, this is Jen to the Blaze Adams, I guess.
That works.
And this was my second time reading it. And I remember, I think my dad like picked it up at the grocery store for me and was like, hey, here's new, because he knew I liked Stephen King. And I think I was around, like I had read Odd Thomas recently, which I know is not Stephen King, so nobody yell at me, but
that's Koontz, baby, right?
It is Koontz, and it's pretty good. Like I
Love my man,
mind
DK.
it. And I just like the weight of those books felt similar. Like I really like this feels like the kind of book you can read kind of on a whim. And I was like, okay, and I just kind of jumped into it. And I was really surprised by how much I liked it the first time I read it. And then this time knowing what it was going to be, I think I did enjoy it even more. I have a lot of thoughts about Bachman, and I've been on a couple of the Bachman episodes, so I've talked a lot about Bachman, but I'm interested to talk about, because I don't feel like this feels like a Bachman book to me at all. And I think my copy says Stephen King writing as Richard Bachman and Stephen King is much bigger letters. And
Same line, yeah.
It feels like kind of like, and I know that's a marketing thing, but I think it feels like Stephen King trying to kind of recapture something that is just, it's not who he is anymore. And I really enjoy it. I really like it, but I feel like Bachman is actually dead,
Yeah.
But I will say I listened to the audiobook. It was read by Ron McClarty, who also reads Salem's Lot. And so hearing those two in the same voice, I feel like was really interesting, because I feel like there are some kind of connections between the two,
Did he do his Barlow voice for George?
He did not. No, he didn't. He actually did. Oh, the George voice was god awful, actually. Yeah, it was very like, yes. It reminded me of Darnell, actually, and Christine. Yeah, see? Anyways, so yeah.
Dan Flieger, say hello and tell us all about you and Blaze.
This is Dan, taking care of business Flieger. Blaze being Blaze. I do hope everyone knows what that is. I finally, over COVID, watched Burning Love. I'm I would say, I don't say enemy, but yeah, probably an enemy of the Bachelor type series. I just don't like, I just think like, I'd rather watch professional sports if I want to see competition. I feel like those things are all fake, but the parody, Blaze being Blaze, man, when I finally watched that, I was cracking up.
Yeah, let's just explain it now. So if you're not aware, there is a television show called Burning Love. It was a parody of the Bachelor franchise with a lot of the guys from the state, people like Michael Ian Black, Ken Marino, Joe Latrulio, like all these guys. And like also like Adam Scott's in it, Kumail Nanjiani's in it, a million other people, like every famous person in the world is in it. And it's very, very funny. And there were 3 seasons, and Ryan Hansen, who's on Party Down, and Veronica Mars, he plays a character named Blaze, who's like so hot that the woman like obviously wants him over all the other guys, and he's completely indifferent to her. Sorry to explain the plot of Burning Love on a Stephen King podcast, but it is true for at least the Dans and I. We cannot see Blaze without thinking of Ryan Hansen's performance as Blaze.
And hey, it's funny because I was debating whether to say just being Blaze just being Blaze tonight, because I'm like, well, it's not King related, but it is, because you guys talked to the Bachelor this season's
it's
Bachelor.
True.
That's
So
right.
it's King's Dominion now. It's King's Dominion. Wait, Jen,
we asked him if he watched Burning Love, and he said he'd heard of it, but he hadn't watched it.
Jen hasn't either. I'm seeing Jen shaking her head now.
I have
That's
not. No, I didn't know what you guys were talking about until just now. So I've been like smiling and nodding, like, yeah.
He says
okay.
it like,
I think the Bachelor is smiling, nodding as well. Like
Oh, yeah.
it makes perfect sense where you're like, have you heard of this thing? Do you get it? And he's like, maybe.
no, it's funny. I assumed that a lot of people knew what this was because from what I remember, Burning Love was very popular back when it debuted.
Yeah, but
I-
it only played on the internet.
That's the
it's
thing,
like
and
it's
it was
like it's like a Hulu exclusive type.
Well,
it
it was
wasn't-
it was a Yahoo TV.
Oh, even
online
worse then.
exclusive. I know, and then it was on Hulu for a long time, but now you have to like buy it on Amazon.
And also,
I-
it was
man.
almost like viral, but pre-viral being a thing, if that makes sense. And
mhm.
because I was looking for gifts to send you guys, I just assumed that there had to be tons of memes or tons of gifs, whatever.
There really isn't.
Of him
I'm gonna
saying just Blaze
I'm
being
gonna-
Blaze, and there's not.
Yeah. I'm
Can I-
going to
can
make
I-
a Blaze being Blaze one for this podcast and for our social media. And just if you hear a soundbite a couple times throughout this episode,
Blaze being Blaze.
that is not us speaking. It's probably from Burning Love.
Can I
Be a
can I
Blaze, you know?
just Blaze being Blaze
Blaze being Blaze.
and finishing my intro?
Yeah, sorry,
I want to
Fleeger,
say
we-
too. What,
yeah,
no,
hijacked it.
it's okay, it's okay. Don't worry, it's totally fine. I just wanted to say what Randall and I and Jen were thinking is Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
You know, there's GIFs, there's images. Caffrey sent 900 lines of coded text in an attempt to send a GIF, but I know you're
Yeah.
a new father. It's okay. I get it. It's just, it was cracking me up.
I was like,
reading on
maybe
my
this
phone.
is the
Horrible.
joke. I don't know.
I had jokes coming, and I was like, I think Randall's got this. And within a few minutes, Randall made a joke at your expense for sending so much coded.
I did the thing where I tried to copy and paste it from my phone, which doesn't work. You have to do that on
Yeah.
desktop, and it was dumb of me. And
It's fine. We saw all the URLs you were visiting.
true.
Your entire search history. Yeah.
Yeah, we got it. But just going back to the Bachman, I think I was on the Regulators.
Yeah,
That might
you
be
were.
that might be the only Bachman I've actually done. But I kind of agree with Jen on this. It doesn't feel as much like a Bachman novel, and I'm sure we'll get into it during the episode. This book felt very unfinished to me, and other than Blaze being funny, I just kept thinking of the cartoon, Which Way Did He Go, George? Like that kind of thing.
It's got that big time.
Oh,
energy,
the,
which is-
those two Looney Tune characters that South Park parodies all
Yes.
the time, Mimsy and I forget what their actual names are. Yeah, I had that. I was thinking that too.
Every time he would say George, I just
Well,
kept
are those
thinking-
characters like direct parodies of Mice and Men?
I think it's like a parody of a parody. Like on South Park, they're parodying this Looney Tunes bit, and it's actually funny because in Looney Tunes they are criminals. They're like these gangster, like a big dumb gangster and
Yeah.
a small, more intelligent, potty mouthed gangster who I think are. I think anytime you have like the big lug with the more talkative, meaner, smaller guy, I just always assume it's a Mice and Men. Hell, Gremlins 2 does it. The two Gremlins are George and Lenny in that.
Classic trope.
It never gets old for me. I love it.
Well, we'll talk about tropes a bit later, but for now, we're going to venture into the Derry Public Library to talk history.
Mike Hanlon, if you see...
Excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Tell Mike Hanlon that I had to go, that I had to get cleaned up. Tell him. Tell him. Tell him I'll see him tonight.
Get out! Last chance, Tosha. Get out! Get out!
So, okay, Blaze, published June 12th, 2007, via Scribner. The book contains, in addition to Blaze, Memory, which was a short story that was first published in 2006, in which King has since worked into Doomaky, which is called The Doomaky. I don't know, did you guys notice that?
I did not read Memory just because I'm on the Doomaky
Oh,
episode, and so
I don't
wanted
need you to
Same.
read it, yeah.
yeah. But
I
did
just
not
thought it
read
was
Noticed
funny
that.
that it said,
Doomaky.
like, King's next book is called The Doomaky. which
Oh,
was
is that
just
what
kind
it
of-
says in the? Hold on.
Yeah.
Let me,
Or at
that's
least
pretty
says it in
cool.
my edition, at least.
It's because
Yeah.
Justin Timberlake showed up and he was like, just
Ah.
It's sexy.
Just drop
He
the
was like-
Stephen.
Yeah.
Mine
I was
says
gonna say,
Okay.
was
This is
Social
weird 'cause
Network
my-
out by this time?
mine says
I
Doomaky,
don't
but I have
know.
a first edition, so I feel like it should be the Doomaky. If it's,
Hmm.
I don't know, weird. Maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have a later edition. I've got, what do I have? Like pocketbooks. I don't know.
It would have been funny if King like had a moment where he's like, you know what, I want to call it the Doomaky instead. Change that in the pocketbooks, and then then he was
And
like,
then, oh yeah, mine says the Doomaky too.
Oh,
it's
nice.
weird.
Wow.
Interesting.
My article's all, it says a Doomaky.
Weird.
Our Doomaky.
Yeah.
Our
Doomaky.
So yeah, it was released with sort of a preview of Doomaky, which is going to be our next book. Start reading; it's very long. And it was released, as most King books of this era were, with an accompanying website that required I download a Flash plugin via the Wayback Machine to visit, which I chose not to do. So, what would you guys want from a 2007 era Blaze website?
I don't know.
Hmm.
Like, it was interactive kind of thing?
Yeah,
or-
there was like from the vibe I got, there was like games and
Like s-
flash animations.
I guess like,
Like-
oh, figure out how to steal this baby. Or
Yeah,
something.
can you
Yeah.
get the baby out of the bedroom?
That's
Like,
how
do
you-
you remember that era of like flash animation websites? Like, they were so impossible to navigate.
Yeah, as long as there's like a construction worker with a hard hat that says website under construction looping, that's when I know I'm on a good site.
I almost feel like it would be like the game Myst or something, where it's just really boring and you're supposedly doing action stuff, but you're just like pointing to things and then a door opens or whatever. I feel
Yeah.
that's like what I associate with that.
I read oh gosh, what are those vampire Twilight? When I was super obsessed with Twilight for like a couple of months, I would go to the website every single day and it was just a picture of Edward and Bella. And I was like, ooh, this looks exciting. So maybe that's what it is.
It
It's
was
just a
good every
picture.
time.
It was, man.
It's like that old Tumblr account that was the same picture of Dave Coulier every day, and it literally was that for like
Yeah.
7 years, and then they stopped. It was great.
Aw.
It was my-
AlanisMorissette.com.
Oh.
So yeah, I don't know. That just made me laugh. I wanted to visit the website, but I don't know. I'm scared to download anything.
Yeah.
That is Flash related. So the first time constant readers ever heard of this book, we're going to talk about the actual history, but let's look at it from the reader's point of view. The first mention of this book in King lore was in the different seasons afterward. So this was, early 80s, I believe, 80, 84, somewhere around there. And here's what was written in the back of that book. Just before the publication of Carrie, my first novel, I got a letter from my editor, Bill Thompson, suggesting it was time to start thinking about what we were going to do for an encore. It may strike you as a bit strange, this thinking about the next book before the first was even out, but because the pre-publication schedule for a novel is almost as long as the post-production schedule on a film, we had been living with Carrie for a long time at that point, nearly a year. I promptly sent Bill the manuscripts of 2 novels, one called Blaze and one called Second Coming. The former had been written immediately after Carrie, during the 6-month period when the first draft of Carrie was sitting in a desk drawer, mellowing. The latter was written during the year or so when Carrie inched, tortoise-like, closer and closer to publication. Blaze was a melodrama about a huge, almost retarded criminal who kidnaps a baby, planning to ransom it back to the child's rich parents, and then falls in love with the child instead. Second Coming was a melodrama about vampires taking over a small town in Maine. Both were literary imitations of a sort. Second Coming of Dracula, Blaze of Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. I think Bill must have been flabbergasted when these 2 manuscripts arrived in a single big package. Some of the pages of Blaze had been typed on the reverse sides of milk bills, and the Second Coming manuscript reeked of beer because someone had spilled a pitcher of Black Label on it during a New Year's Eve party 3 months before. Like a woman. What's that?
Someone spelled.
Yeah, I know, right? Like a woman who wishes for a bouquet of flowers and discovers her husband has gone out and bought her a hothouse. This was written in the early 80s. The 2 manuscripts together totaled about 550 single-space pages. He read them both over the next couple of weeks, scratch an editor and find a saint, and I went down to New York from Maine to celebrate the publication of Carrie. April 1974, friends and neighbors. Lennon was alive, Nixon was still hanging in there as president, and this kid had yet to see the first gray hair in his beard. And to talk about which of the 2 books should be next, or if neither of them should be next. I was in the city for a couple of days and we talked around the question 3 or 4 times. The final decision was made on a street corner, Park Avenue and 44th Street, in fact. Bill and I were standing there waiting for the light, watching the cabs roll by into that funky tunnel or whatever it is, the one that seems to burrow straight through the Pan Am building. And Bill said, I think it should be Second Coming. Well, that was the one I liked better myself, but there was something so oddly reluctant in his voice that I looked at him sharply and I asked him what the matter was. It's just that if you do a book about vampires as the follow-up to a book about a girl who can move things by mind power, you're going to get typed, he said. Typed, I asked? Honestly bewildered, I could see no similarities to speak of between vampires and telekinesis. As what? As a horror writer, he said, more reluctantly still. Oh, I said, vastly relieved. Is that all? Give it a few years, he said, and see if you still don't think it's all. Bill, I said amused, no one can make a living writing just horror stories in America. Lovecraft starved in Providence, Block gave it up for suspense novels and unknown type spoofs, and so on and so forth. Essentially, King was saying that Oops, I actually was able to make a living writing horror novels, but I didn't always write horror novels. And so that was the afterword to Different Seasons, which were, four, if you haven't read it, which you should because it's quite good, 4 novellas, all of them, if not horror, like Breathing Method is like horror adjacent. The rest are pretty divorced, I think, from traditional horror. It's Shawshank, The Body, which turned into Stand By Me, and At Pupil, which is horrific, but not really horror. So, King was essentially saying in this that, I can do more than just write horror. I think, and that's a question which we have often explored on this podcast, the idea of him wanting to be seen as more than just a genre writer, but also hopping back and forth between loving the genre writer in himself and resisting it aggressively. So let's fast forward now to 2007. This is from the Blaze forward. We didn't hear anything else about Blaze in that time, not until it actually was released. And the forward includes a lot of information, some of which is a little bit contrasting to what we already knew, and we're going to discuss that. But let me start with the beginning of the forward, and then we're going to take a break from that, discuss the discrepancies, and then get back to it. So here's how the Blaze forward starts. Dear Constant Reader, this is a trunk novel, okay? I want you to know that while you've still got your sales slip and before you drip something like gravy or ice cream on it and thus make it difficult or impossible to return. It's a revised and updated trunk novel, but that doesn't change the basic fact. The Bachman name is on it because it's the last novel from 1966 to 1973, which was that gentleman's period of greatest productivity. During those years, I was actually 2 men. It was Stephen King who wrote and sold horror stories to raunchy skin mags like Cavalier and Atom, but it was Bachman who wrote a series of novels that didn't sell to anybody. These included Rage, The Long Walk, Road Work, and The Running Man. All 4 were published as paperback originals. Blaze was the last of those early novels, the 5th quarter, if you like, or just another well-known writer's trunk novel, if you insist. It was written in late 72 and early 73. I thought it was great while I was writing it, and crap when I read it over. My recollection is that I never showed it to a single publisher, not even Doubleday, where I had made a friend named William G. Thompson. Bill was the guy who would later discover John Grisham, and it was Bill who contracted for the book following Blaze, a twisted but fairly entertaining tale of prom night in Central Maine. So, something's not adding up. Can you guys tell me what it is?
Well, because
He said he never showed it to an editor.
Mm-hmm.
and also he in one instance he says it's pre-Carrie, and the
Yeah.
other one instance he
It's
says it's
post-Carrie.
post-Carrie.
Correct.
So what is it? Has the sleuth solved this mystery, or is it just?
Of course.
Yeah.
He was just getting old and he forgot. No, I'm kidding. That's not
Can
it.
I say it's cool to see King finally mention John Grisham in one of his? No, I'm just kidding. But I do like the dating. It's like, the guy who eventually discovered John Grisham. Let's not forget I was there before Johnny. So
Yeah. I
They're
also
friends.
love, like, this is the couple times he does with the stand too. He's like, hey, before you throw that receipt away, just so you know, like we're gonna change our mind and like return this to the
do you mean
store or
the
something.
sales slip?
Cracks me up. Yeah, before you spill anything on it.
Okay. So yeah, something's not adding up. You guys listened well. You caught it. So King writes in the Different Seasons forward that he submitted Blaze alongside Second Coming, which would become Salem's Lot, as possible follow-ups to Carrie. That clashes with King's claim here that he never submitted it anywhere. It also clashes with him saying that he wrote the novel. He says 74 to 75 in the Different Seasons afterward, 72, 73 in the forward. So many thanks to Bryant Burnett, Losers Club historian, archivist, and Bev Vincent, who has written about this on his blog, for pointing at this discrepancy out to me. As they noted, King told the Different Seasons story again in a 2006 interview in the Paris Review with one major difference. So here's the quote from the Paris Review in 2006. I remember having this conversation with Bill Thompson, my first editor at Doubleday. They had just published Carrie, which was a big success, and they wanted a follow-up book. I gave him 2 other books I had already written, Salem's Lot and, do you have a guess?
Carrie.
Road
What'd
work.
you say? Road Work, it is.
Road Work, oh, man.
It was Road Work, which was later published under my pseudonym Richard Bachman. I asked him which one he wanted to do first. He said, you're not going to like the answer. He said that Road Work was a more honestly dealt novel, a novelist novel, if you know what I mean, but that he wanted to do Salem's Lot because he thought it would have greater commercial success. So, why do you guys think he lied?
I think I have read ahead a little bit in the document. So I think because he was still trying to pretend to be Bachman, or he was
Right.
still, he didn't want to out himself.
I'm cracking up just reading. It's like, so we have Salem's Lot and Roadwork. Which one
I
do
know,
you think is
right?
I know.
Apples and
Although I think
oranges, right?
The description of it being a novelist's novel, I find actually really interesting. I'm like, that fits a little better than I just.
Here's the thing. We're not going to do this on this pod because if we start talking about Roadwork, we probably
That's
won't
true.
stop. But I am rereading Roadwork right now.
Oh,
'cause it's
really?
the one Bachman book I've not reread for the podcast. I read it when I was young, but I wasn't on that episode. So that book is fascinating. And that book to me is the epitome of what Richard Bachman is. And it is, to me, I think going to be the centerpiece of some of our conversations later in the month about Bachman, because I think it really reveals a lot. But Dan, Flieger, I had the exact same thought, which is like, put those two novels next to each other, like hilarious, right?
Mhm.
But I think that what that speaks to in a nutshell is that Salem's Lot, for as amazing it is, was a horror book. Roadwork, for as rough as it is, was still an adult novel, right? And he was in his like mid-20s. Like he thought he had written something extremely profound in Roadwork. And I think that because he was really grappling with the issues in the time, and it was also came from a place, I think, of really deep sentimentality and earnestness, whereas Salem's Lot perhaps didn't. But so I think there was sort of a clouded perception of what each book was. And that to me is really fascinating.
Well, it's funny because Barton Dawes is not acting like an adult in Roadwork, if I do say so myself. So just put that out there.
With the two compared, and because I always mention The Simpsons, but they go to a fancy restaurant, they give us your most expensive meal and your second most. And they're like, all right, lobster and tacos.
Well,
and that's kind of how I feel about Salem's. Yeah, lobster stuff with tacos.
Stuff with tacos.
But that's how I feel about those two novels, because it's just such a difference between Salem's Lot and Roadwork. Oh my goodness.
I mean, this is not exaggeration. Salem's Lot is my favorite King novel. Roadwork is my least favorite King novel. Like, far away. So, yeah.
But it's
they
more of
made
a
the right
novelist
choice,
novel, though.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't reading enough John Cheever when I read Roadwork.
So yeah, we're going to spend some time later in the month, I think, peeling back some of those layers that we just touched on here. But yeah, you guys are right. Different Seasons came out in 82. Roadwork came out in 81. He wouldn't be outed as Richard Bachman for several more years. So his little fib was likely in service to keeping his pseudonym safe. Although he's never pointed that out, or he's never like acknowledged that he fibbed in the Different Seasons afterward, which, I mean, to be honest, he's probably forgotten about by this point. Only dorks like us care about it. But but Bryant Burnett, he actually was sort of theorizing a little bit about why he felt the need to sort of tell that story at all in the Different Seasons afterward. And I thought this was perceptive, so I wanted to read it. Bryant said, it also probably explains why he felt the urge to tell a little fib in Different Seasons afterward and use Blaze as a stand-in for Roadwork. He must have wanted to tell the story of how he, post-Carrie, had a real moment where he was putting forward a very serious non-horror book as a potential left-turn career path. He couldn't mention Roadwork without giving up the Bachman identity, so he looked around the drawers a bit to see what else he could talk about, and boom, there was Blaze. He must have figured, well, I'm never publishing that one anyway, so who will ever know? Which hardy har. So I thought that was smart, and a notion that I think I'll be revisiting later when we're talking more about Bachman. So I will say, though, the story from the Different Seasons afterward is still listed on Blaze's Wikipedia page, proving once again that we must never trust anything we read on the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the foreword. Here's what King says. I forgot about Blaze for a few years. Then after the other early Bachmans had been published, I took it out and looked it over. After reading the first 20 pages or so, I decided my first judgment had been correct and returned it to Purda. I thought the writing was okay, but the story reminded me of something Oscar Wilde once said. He claimed it was impossible to read The Old Curiosity Shop without weeping copious tears of laughter. So Blaze was forgotten, but never really lost. It was only stuffed in some corner of the Fogler Library at the University of Maine with the rest of their Stephen King, Richard Bachman stuff. Blaze ended up spending the next 30 years in the dark, and then I published a slim paperback original called The Colorado Kid with an imprint called Hard Case Crime. This line of books, the brainchild of a very smart and very cool fellow named Charles Ardai, was dedicated to reviving old noir and hard-boiled paperback crime novels and publishing new ones. The Kid was decidedly soft-boiled, but Charles decided to publish it anyway with one of those great old paperback covers. So About a year later, I thought maybe I'd like to go to the hard case route again, possibly with something that had a harder edge. My thoughts turned to Blaze for the first time in years, but trailing along behind came that damn Oscar Wilde quote about the old curiosity shop. One must have a heart of stone to read The Death of Little Nell without laughing. Which is just so bitchy, it makes me laugh. Okay, so back to Blaze. He says, the Blaze I remembered wasn't hard-boiled noir, but a three-handkerchief weepy. Still, I decided it wouldn't hurt to look, if that was the book could even be found. I remembered the carton, and I remembered the squarish typeface, my wife Tabitha's old college typewriter, and impossible to kill Olivetti portable. But I had no idea what had become of the manuscript that was supposedly inside the carton. For all I knew, it was gone, baby, gone. It wasn't. Marcia, one of my two valuable assistants, found it in the Fogler library. She would not trust me with the original manuscript. I lose things. But she made a Xerox. I must have been using a next-to-dead typewriter ribbon when I composed Blaze because the copy was barely legible and the notes on the margins were little more than blurs. Still, I sat down with it and began to read, ready to suffer the pangs of embarrassment only one's younger, smart-assier self can provide. But I thought it was pretty good. Certainly better than Roadwork, which I had at the time considered mainstream American fiction. It just wasn't a noir novel. It was rather a stab at the sort of naturalism within crime that James M. Cain and Horace McCoy practiced in the 30s. I thought the flashbacks were actually better than the front story. They reminded me of James T. Farrell's Young Lonergan trilogy and the forgotten but tasty Gas House McGinty. Sounds fake. All this sounds so fake.
Tasty.
Sure, it was the 3 P's in places, but it had been written by a young man, I was 25, who was convinced he was writing for the ages. I thought Blaze could be rewritten and published without too much embarrassment, but it was probably wrong for hard case crime. It was, in a sense, not a crime novel at all. I thought it could be a minor tragedy of the underclass if the rewriting was ruthless. To that end, I adopted the flat, dry tones which the best noir fiction seems to have, even using a type font called American Typewriter to remind myself of what I was up to. Remember when fonts were like it was like a novelty? Mm-hmm. That was fun. I worked fast, never looking ahead or back, wanting also to capture the headlong drive of those books. I'm thinking more of Jim Thompson and Richard Stark here than I am of Cain, McCoy, or Farrell. I thought I would do my revisions at the end with a pencil rather than editing in the computer, as is now fashionable. If the book was going to be a throwback, I wanted to play into that rather than shying away from it. I also determined to strip all the sentiment I could from the writing itself, wanted the finished book to be as stark as an empty house without even a rug on the floor. My mother would have said I wanted its bare face hanging out. Only the reader will be able to judge if I succeeded. One other thing, while I've got you by the lapel, I tried to keep the Blaze time frame as vague as possible so it wouldn't seem too dated. It was impossible to take out all the dated material, however, keeping some of it was important to the plot. If you think of this story's time frame as America not all that long ago, I think you'll be okay. And then he says, may I close by circling back to where I started? This is an old novel, but I believe I was wrong in my initial assessment that it was a bad novel. You may disagree, but The Little Match Girl ain't. As always, constant reader, I wish you well. I thank you for reading this story, and I hope you enjoy it. I won't say I hope you missed up a little, but yeah, I will say that, just as long as they're not tears of laughter. He says, Stephen King for Richard Bachman, Sarasota, Florida, January 30th, 2007. What were your big takeaways from that intro? Like, what stands out to you as sort of, I don't know, something you find particularly interesting about it?
I think that, I mean, it's interesting because we don't have the pages from before this, right? But I think what he says about tempering the sentimentality makes a lot of sense because the book really does toe that line with how tragic it is. I mean, if you trace everything in Blaze's life, it is almost comical how sad it is. It is Dickensian. It is very much like The Little Match Girl, right? But it works for me because it does have that style he's talking about where the sentimentality is stripped and it's almost... It's not cold and clinical because I think there's a lot of humor in the novel and there's a lot of warmth to it to an extent, but it's not trying too hard. It doesn't feel too labored. It doesn't feel like it's trying so hard to elicit emotion. For instance, I really love this what could be a sentimental ending with this baby seeing the ghost of Blaze, right? Like the idea that that thing is being passed on to this baby. That could be really hokey, but it almost, maybe this is too hyperbolic of a comparison, but it almost reminded me of something like you would read in Lincoln in the Bardo or something. Just this, it had this idea of the afterlife that goes beyond the clouds opening up and no, what it is not like. It is not like in the Stan miniseries where you see Mother Abigail's head looking down on the baby. It almost feels mystical.
I wrote that down.
I really did. Ooh, she's just, and then the credits roll. So I think obviously we don't have the deleted pages to compare it to, but I do think the novel gets away with what it gets away with because of the lack of sentimentality. I actually, when he wrote that very much resonated with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to talk more about what aspects of this feel like a young writer a little bit later, and I think that definitely is part of it. So we'll talk more about that. Jen, what were you going to say? Oh, go ahead, Fleer.
No. Jen, you please go.
Well, I think at first I was kind of rolling my eyes with like the edits by pencil because I just think about what a pain in the ass that would be. But I feel like that maybe is what makes this really feel like a trunk novel, because I think when I first got it, I was like, this isn't a trunk novel. That's just a gimmick. Like he just wrote this now and he's just saying it is. But I like reading it a couple of times and really kind of familiarizing myself with Bachman. I think it is. And I think that like getting himself back into that mindset is what really allowed him to kind of tap back into this younger writer feeling, and it still doesn't feel like the early Bachmans to me, but like he's such a writer of the moment and his mindset just like bleeds onto the page in a good way that I think like that was probably a key part of it, was to like put himself back into the time period when he wrote this, so it doesn't feel too disjointed or jarring,
Yeah. What were you going to say, Fleeger?
I checking my notes. It says just Blaze being Blaze over and over again.
Blaze being Blaze.
No, it is funny because I'm sure Twitter was around, but the intro sounds the tone of his intro in this sounds so much like tweets where it's like, can I please say, like these little sort of like asides that make it conversational more than literary, which just crack me up. Mm-hmm. I think this feels very different than the other Bachman novels, and I'll save my thoughts for the episode coming up, but I don't, and I mean, a little hint, this feels like an unfinished novel, and I know he went back and did finish it, but it still feels incomplete to me.
Yeah.
And some of this, when you start comparing it to Oscar Wilde and like Dickensian novels, I don't know that this maybe can hold a match to those. I don't know, hold a match girl up to those.
A little girl match.
I don't know if they hold a little girl match. Like it's more that joke back in the day where it's like, hey, you got a match? And it's like, yeah, my butt in your face. Like that sort of attitude. I don't know. There's like a little bit of a defensive quality in this intro that I'm picking up on, which he has in some of his other novels. I don't know.
No, I know what you mean. And I think like that's sort of what I was getting at. I think a little in my intro where I was talking about that band Valley Maker and the way that like they couldn't really reference that early album without laughing at themselves a little bit or being a little bit on the defense, like, oh, I'm a lot further along now than I was then. But so, if this is a trunk novel, so save your receipt in case you don't like it, that kind of attitude.
Sales slip.
Sales slip. Yes.
I just think it's so funny.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wonder if this just came out as a Stephen King novel, like the newest Stephen King novel, how we would feel about it, because there is kind of like a curiosity factor to it, where it like it feels like, I don't know, relic's not quite the right word, but it feels like an oddity also too, which I think heightens my experience reading it.
I think relic might actually be accurate, and we can talk about that, and at least in terms of the way the tropes it incorporates, you know what I mean? But yeah, so okay. Few other things in the history before we move on. The Haven Foundation. So the Haven Foundation, this is mentioned in the afterword too, but King elaborated on it a bit in an interview with Lilch's Library that I mentioned, about how all the proceeds from this book went to the Haven Foundation, which was previously called the Wave Dancer Foundation. It was meant to help out freelance artists in financial distress. We talked about it in one of our Dark Tower episodes. What I remember, we looked up we couldn't find stuff on the Wave Dancer Foundation, and that's because he changed the name to the Haven Foundation. So
but TV show or before, or that was before the TV show, I guess, but that would
no, it was close at least, because I know that we're covering Haven, I believe, next month. So but yeah, so this is from the interview. The idea was to help writers and artists who were down on their luck, and we got to have some money to start with. We got to have startup money. So I'm thinking to myself, I need a book. I need to publish a book and copyright it to the Haven Foundation, and all the money can go to this thing because I don't need any more money, you know? I guess everybody could use it right now, but right now I don't exactly need it anymore. So he says, Blaze was what occurred to me, and I thought, well, it's probably not good enough. Why not look at it again and see? So I did, and I was wrong about it. It's really a good book. So I rewrote it, and it was very funny to get the manuscript because it was done in my wife's old typewriter. Tabby claims that I married her for a typewriter. She had a nice little Olivetti portable typewriter, very sturdy, and I wrote Carrie on it, Blaze, and a bunch of other stuff as well. I guess I wrote Shawshank on that typewriter too, on a kitchen table in Boulder. I went ahead and I rewrote it and sent it in, and they liked it at Scribner, so we're gonna do it. And that was before the book came out. So yeah, all the proceeds from this book go towards that foundation, which I don't know the state of it currently, but I don't know. I'm sure it's still around in some incarnation because I know that he helped launch it. I believe he did a live event or a fundraiser or something with J.K. Rowling and John Grisham and a few others to help launch this thing. So I know that there was a lot of big power behind it. But yeah, a few other things from the Lilja interview. He says the first draft was 173 pages, and you mentioned this earlier, Dan, but yeah, he says he essentially rewrote the first 100 pages, which I think is notable as we move deeper into our discussion, because when we talk about sentimentality, I sure think a lot of it's still there in the end. Yeah. Which almost makes me wonder if he ran out of time. He's like, I don't have time to rewrite the end of it, so we're just gonna go with what I initially had. So yeah, before it was published, Stephen Spignacy, who had access to King's unpublished works and in the library, he wrote a little bit about Blaze in the Lost Works of Stephen King. He described the plot in detail and suggested that the book felt like a Bachman novel, and that was before it was officially designated as one. So that was from the Lost Works of Stephen King, which obviously came out years before this release. Critical reception. This is not a book that it was easy to find reviews for. I don't think it was reviewed by a lot of people. I think it was a pretty muted release and considered, probably because it was a Bachman book, non-essential. I could not find any New York Times reviews, Entertainment Weekly reviews, and they usually cover every King. I did find an AV Club review from Tasha Robinson. She wrote, nothing about this description, a long rejected novel rapidly rewritten and rushed to press, sounds particularly promising, but until its abrupt ending, Blaze is one of King/Bachman's better reads, a bare, breathless thriller that minimizes King's usual quirks and picadillos while leaving plenty of room for his talent with characterization and vivid real-world scenarios. It ends, the sense of looming doom, like the mixed sympathies, the speedy crime caper writing, and King's typical attention to telling specific detail all make Blaze irresistible, at least until King wraps things up in a few bare, unsatisfying paragraphs. Dan, are you going to have some words about that?
You're talking to me about?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised. Am I the only one who? I thought this was some of King's most economical, effective prose. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. I didn't find it sentimental or mawkish or overwrought or anything. I agree with the I don't want to say the ending ran out of steam. I'll wait till we get to Misery. There's sort of a structural device that to me becomes imbalanced in the second half of the book. But yeah, I don't know. I just have to flat out disagree. I guess the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? But
I'm just poking at you.
I thought we were all going to agree this is a masterpiece, but fine. I guess I'll just fucking go.
No, I agree with you
person's
too.
baby, I guess. Yeah. Jen, back me up.
I do. Yeah. And I really like the ending. I think maybe the second time I've read it, and I think I find that a lot is when I have issues with an ending, I don't mind it so much the second time, and actually it grows on me a lot. And I think I found it fits with who I see Blaze being more. Yeah. I don't.
Well, he's just Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
He is just Blaze being Blaze,
It's Blaze being Blaze.
Well, King to me almost feels like he has a very tight control he feels very measured here when he's writing. It's a short book, and also he doesn't do that thing where he just goes on 4 sentences too long about anything ever in this, I don't think. And not that necessarily makes the prose good, but on top of that, I feel like he's very visually evocative here. He doesn't get too hammy. I mean, to me, the ending doesn't feel sentimental, because it feels fairly unforgiving to me. Like
Yeah.
I feel like the sentimental King or the hokey King or whatever else would have gone to great lengths to show that Blaze is just a good misunderstood guy. But he doesn't. He shows him killing people. I mean, he kills this fucking old lady when he steals. Like, Blaze is still like a bad dude. I mean, maybe it's not his fault because of being dropped on his head multiple times or whatever else. But I think if King wanted to, he could have made him like a John Coffey, right? And he doesn't. He still recognizes, no, this guy is a murderer. He does bad things. At the end of the day, he still is endangering this little baby that he stole. So yeah, I just flat out disagree with all of this. And I
have a counterpoint to you that I will raise a little bit later.
Yeah, I know once we get into characters and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. This is from something called Onyx. I believe this review was written by Bev Vincent, who is King Scholar, somebody we've had in the pod before. Very smart. He wrote, Blaze is not as sophisticated as King's more recent works, but it is an early harbinger of his skills. The fundamental success of the book relies on characterization, which has always been King's forte. His ability to make readers root for a con man, robber, thief, kidnapper, and killer makes Blaze stand out. Blaze is a predecessor to the Stand's Tom Cullen, another simple man who experienced flashes of brilliance. If Tom had fallen under the wrong influences, he might have ended up in similar circumstances. So those were the only reviews that I was able to rustle up, but I think that's okay because, I don't know, this isn't the kind of book where I'm particularly interested in sort of intellectual reads on its like deeper ideas, because I don't think this book is particularly aiming for anything profound, which is a strength of it.
I agree.
This is absolutely kind of a dime store paperback kind of book.
It's all about the narrative, as opposed to like Lissie's story, right? Which is actually not a very narrative novel if you think about it. It's mostly backstory. It's more about what it's saying. And yeah, and I agree with you. That's a total strength. It's about. I mean, it's almost like it's beholden to the outline. It's beholden to the speed of which it moves. It's beholden to the genre. And I think that's all great. I think that's what I mean when I feel like it's not belabored or trying to do too much. But because it's King and because it has this kind of angle of, oh yeah, what if the mice and men dudes are criminals and one of them was dead? And that's pretty much it, right? That to me is enough of that is so aesthetically and visually interesting to me that I don't really need it to say much. Anyway,
I just on that point though, it's like when you say it doesn't need to do too much, I don't think it did enough. And it is, to me, interesting to hear it like compared with Salem's Lot and Carrie, because you're like, what if King had submitted this as his first novel? Like, would he even have the success he has now?
It's a good question.
You know, I don't mind this being a tertiary novel in my opinion, but I just can't see this being held up in the same esteem, I guess, as some of those other novels.
Yeah, this is something Jen and Mike and I have talked about a lot in our archive series where, we've really spent a lot of time, I think, peeling back College King and the writer he wanted to be then, which was not particularly a horror writer. Like it was really a matter of circumstance that he ended up being a horror writer. It was because Carrie was his 5th or 6th book, I can't recall. And, it was the first horror book he had written. He had written genre, like he had certainly written horror stories. A lot of his early work, the stories were creepy, but a lot of his, you read like Stud City, right? I know you guys have all read that, which is featured in The Body. We did, we have a whole archives episode where we talked about those stories, and those were very much stabs at sort of literary fiction. He was definitely trying to write like probably a lot of the writers he was reading in college. And I think that, as much as he liked genre, he was still trying to write those quote unquote adult novels. And that is where I think the tension really lies. And so Flieger, I think that's such a good question of like, what if a different book had been published first? It really would have changed the entire trajectory of his career. Like this choice to lead with Carrie and Salem's Lot for his, it's not accidental, but it was literally a matter of the right person reading the right manuscript at the right time. That really helped contribute to his success, because if it were up to King, he probably would have wanted to publish something like Roadwork first, because I think he thought that a book like that was more quote unquote important. I think he recognizes now in retrospect, especially in the intro to Bachman books, he expresses an affection for Roadwork, but he also calls it, one of the worst. He knows it's not a very good book as he got older. So Jen, what were you going to say?
Well, I think I love that anecdote about like being typecast as a horror writer, and when we were talking earlier about this being a crime novel, maybe it's just that I haven't read many crime novels, but like it doesn't like Stephen King to me almost transcends genre at this point. Like he is Stephen King, that's his books, and his books have their own kind of identity to them, and that's what stands out to me. But I think when I read something like Carrie or Salem's Lot, it almost feels like he's kind of just falling into the story. And with some of the earlier Bachmans, there feels like a structure and a labor to it, you know, that he's trying to connect these dots. And I think there's like, he just writes what he's interested in. And I think he was just really interested in horror, and that's what he was finding himself being very good at, you know. And as he's gotten older, he's, I think, been able to make the less horrific novels work more. I have a lot of thoughts about what was going on in his personal life that allows that. But that's kind of why I think this novel works, because it's from an older hand that has figured out how to make this non-hack and slash, and I say that with love, voice work, like a non-horrific novel be really compelling in a way that I don't know if young King had mastered yet, you know?
Yeah. Cool. What do I got next here? All right. We are going to read the synopsis before moving into the hook. So I'm going to read the synopsis on the back of my Pocketbooks edition. Once upon a time, a fellow named Richard Bachman wrote Blaze on an Olivetti typewriter, then turned the machine over to Stephen King, who used it to write Carrie. Bachman died in 1985, cancer of the pseudonym, but this last gripping Bachman novel resurfaced after being hidden away for decades, an unforgettable crime story tinged with sadness and suspense. Clayton Blaisdell Jr. was always a small-time delinquent. None too bright either, thanks to the beatings he got as a kid. Then Blaze met George Rackley, a seasoned pro with 100 cons and one big idea. The kidnapping should go off without a hitch, with George as the brains behind their dangerous scheme. But there's only one problem. By the time the deal goes down, Blaze's partner in crime is dead. Or is he? I think that's such a weird synopsis, because it plays with the idea that, like, wait, is George, like, a ghost or whatever? And I feel like that notion is dispelled pretty quickly. It's just, like, a figment in his head.
Well, yeah, because the one cashier sees Blaze like talking to himself pretty much, right? So,
right.
And what also too, it's funny that, I mean, we talked about this a lot in the in the background, but yeah, it's funny that we're talking about King not wanting to be marketed as a horror writer back in the day, blah, 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 because Blaze, like, even the fucking cover of this first edition looks like Salem's Lot. I mean, it's like...
I think that's why I always thought... the cover you have, Dan, is the one I always knew. And so I think I associated it with, like, a haunted house or something.
Yeah, and so
cover.
Maybe they're trying... I think maybe that's why people didn't know much about it, is because it is such a mislead... Yeah, because there's no point at all where you're supposed to think George is still alive or
and my copy too is like a creepy empty car with Blaze written in the windshield. Like, oh, you have the same one, John.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like The Shining or something.
And there's like a and there's like a ghostly hand in the bottom corner, like touching the window. It's like, and like that back cover is written like a horror synopsis, and I feel like whoever wrote that synopsis read maybe the first 50 pages and then and then wrote the synopsis. Like, it's like, some intern who's like got their plate full. And I don't know, I found it very jarring because I feel like the story, if you really need to focus on the event, like, focus more on the kidnapping. It's like not really about George necessarily. This is really a character study at the end of the day.
And one thing I really love about this novel is that it doesn't try to pretend that George is alive. Like, I would have rolled my eyes so hard if at the end, oh, George had been dead the whole time. Like, I like that right out of the gate we know that he's dead.
Yeah.
But I also think, like, the title is kind of like, Blaze doesn't seem like a name either. Like, it almost kind of has got that fire starter kind of feel to
right.
it.
I always thought it was like fire, haunted house, something
Right.
burned down.
Yeah.
That was the vibe I always had.
I same thing. I thought, like, Firestarter alternate title could have been Blaze as I was
Yeah.
reading through this. And yeah, going to what Dan said too, like, there was a period where I was like, I wonder if George can physically interact with the world. But then once, I think it was the cashier that noticed him sort of vocalizing George's presence. And it reminded me a lot of, like, both Fleabag, if you guys watched that series, where she breaks the fourth wall but gets caught breaking the fourth wall by another character during the show, which is cool. And sort of scenes from Beautiful Mind, where he allows sort of the people in his head to, like, watch the baby while he goes in the other room.
Yeah.
Because I was waiting for that moment of, like, is George going to break into this reality? And I didn't think it was going to happen. And I didn't expect it to, but deep down I was like, oh, as a first time reader of this novel, I did want to know like what the limits of George's presence were. And again, this does feel like a book that was written by a young person.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Yeah. Any other thoughts before we move into the hook? Cool. Let's move into the hook.
Ah. Yes. Don't you see? Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future, I can change it. You can change it, exactly.
Okay, the hook is where we talk about what is this book about? What is it trying to do? What are the given circumstances? What's orbiting around this book? What are we thinking about? I started this, the kind of first topic I put here on our little, agenda is I wrote the final Bachman book, which I think is notable. And I think there's a lot of questions you could ask, like, as a Bachman book, I do want to ask this question. I don't want to like belabor it, but what is Bachman-esque about this book? Like, what are the elements that stand out to make it a Bachman book? Like that Stephen Spignesi guy mentioned before, it was classified as one that he thought it was a Bachman book. So what are the traditional elements of Bachman that you see in here? Dan Caffrey, what do you think?
For me, yeah, because I feel like I'm the one who said, "Oh, I feel like this is the." I should rephrase that. I think it's the epitome of what he said a Bachman book was back in the day, if that makes sense. Not like, it's not like Rage, it's not like The Long Walk, it's not like Roadwork, but I feel like the sort of Bachman mythos has always been, it's less supernatural, which, as we established, I don't think Blaze is a supernatural novel. Well, I don't know. You know what? I will say, because the baby sees him at the end. That might be supernatural. I don't know.
Yeah, that's just some Mother Abigail shit.
Yeah.
I always think of her she
her.
coos, right? Isn't she like, ooh, baby, at the end?
Oh.
Yeah. And then they have the Hallmark credits go.
Love
through.
it.
Actually, I love the Stan miniseries. No shit.
Yeah.
We all do. We've devoted like 30 hours of this podcast.
Right.
So the non-supernatural element, I like I said, I think this is actually a very dark novel as far as the events that are laid out, almost comically so. I think Bachman is a twisted sense of humor. Once again, King is a twisted sense of humor too, but in here you really do. I think it does not feel like a tragedy because there almost seems to be a glee in how dark all the events are in it. I guess King's never said Bachman is hard boiled per se, but I guess just the crime element, right? Like I feel like with maybe the exception of The Long Walk, the Bachman novels all very much have to do with crime, right? Like Rage is a school shooter. Thinner is this mafioso lawyer. Even The Running Man, right? Like he's contesting with all this kind of corrupt government officials. Maybe The Regulators not so much. I guess The Regulators is supernatural. That's
The Regulators is a weird book to be a Bachman book. That's something we're going to talk about.
I almost feel like Regulators is. I think he just wanted to write twin novels and thought it was funny to have one be
absolutely. That's where I'm like, I think the distinctions are breaking down,
Yeah, no, exactly.
But no, I think you're right, Dan. I think it's like what really characterizes Bachman is a meanness, like and a chilliness, and then a very dark sense of humor, like a very dark and wry sense of humor,
like how George is like Bachman to me. I guess that is the Bachman tone is very much George's role in this book.
Well, I think there's also like I look when I think of Bachman, I think of the scene when he kidnaps the baby and he, there's a cat and the cat like draws the old woman down and he can't do anything but punch her. And when he it's almost kind of funny. Yeah, it's almost kind of funny, like the way it's written, like not in a gleeful ha kind of way, but in a kind of, oh geez, like this big lug not knowing what to do, and this cat
gets scared by he talks about her looking scary because she has hair curlers like she's in a sci-fi movie, and he freaks out. Like that's kind of funny if you think about it.
It's like Back to the Future.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah,
and it doesn't linger on the tragedy of it, like it, at least of that woman. It lingers on Blaze's tragedy as we go on, and that's where I think the Kingian sense is bursting through, because I don't think if this were a Roadworkian or Long Walkian kind of, or Running Manian kind of a book, that we would get that kind of deep sentimentality that we get with Blaze, this deep sense of empathy and sympathy that I think radiates off the narrator towards that character, whereas all the other characters, on the other hand, I think are treated with that Bachman wryness, that kind of like, these aren't fully real people, and it's kind of fun to watch them suffer to some degree.
Yeah. I struggled to and just to keep it going, regulatorian sense. Because in my mind I was like, oh no, exactly, like Thinatorian or something. I struggled though to classify the Bachman. Like, I saw your prompt, Randall, and was like, what does make this a Bachman book? But I like to think that they're similar, but I do think they sort of all go off in their own direction, and there are these crime elements. There is a cruelty to these that is a little different than maybe most mainstream King. I don't know. It's almost like the Twitter draft novel. It's like the idea is there. They don't always feel very finished. And I do love some of the Bachman books, like Long Walkian guy here. But this one again, though, there was nothing in it that once I kind of got the beat of it, I was like able to predict, which I'm sure most readers have, like, okay, it's not going to work out for Blaze. Like when they were going into like him on the farm, you're like, okay, when does this blow up in his face? And it sort of loses the luster over time, because you can kind of see it coming. Whereas some of my favorite King novels, you don't know where they're going, and you think you might have an idea of the formula, and it just doesn't work out that way. Whereas this, and a lot of the Bachman novels in general, they do sort of adhere to a little bit of like a structure that we can kind of see.
An established structure, yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that he compares it so often to other great novels makes me feel like he's trying to elevate the quality of the work by comparing it, but I don't think it holds. Like, for example, like, does anyone read Vonnegut here? But there's the Kilgore Trout character, which is like an alter ego of Kurt Vonnegut. Yeah. And he's sort of a failed sci-fi writer, and a lot of the Vonnegut novels will just sort of give like the elevator pitch of some of his. So he wrote a story about this, and this is what happened. And that's how I feel about a lot of the Bachman stuff. It's like if King could pitch in a couple sentences to be like, and get this, the guy was this, and then it turned out it blew up in his face. So there I don't know, there's a sense of it being like half-baked, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think like rereading Roadwork, he name drops Vonnegut specifically. I think that he was name dropping a lot of his influences and the things that he was studying. I mean, all this stuff was still rich in his head, and he was still finding himself as a writer in a lot of these. I mean, look at how clearly beholden this is to Of Mice and Men in terms of just setting up a dynamic, the central dynamic, one of the things that drives it. I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, any writer will tell you that the earliest, like the best way to start writing is to imitate, to write something that imitates work that you admire. And then you eventually will find your voice out of that. And so I think that there is an element of that in Bachman's work where he was emulating other writers. And look at how many writers he name dropped just in the foreword that he wrote. Which have you guys read any of those? I mean, I imagine they're like old pulp, paper, like dime store paperback kind of crime novels, which
I've read a little of like John MacDonald, who King always cites. I'm by no means an expert in hard-boiled crime, but I've read a few things here and there. I mean, it's always funny because he almost seems to aspire to that. Just the way he talks about it, he almost talks about it with more reverence than he does about horror. Like I feel
Absolutely.
like he almost views these guys, like the Dashiell Hammett books or whatever else. I feel like he almost views them as like the cool kids club that he wants to be in. And look, I've read a few of those books. They're all right, but I kind of be like, no, King, you're cooler than them. You don't need to do.
But I think
Holly
these
Gibney.
were the
Come
books.
on.
Yeah, these were the books that his dad left him. I think like those are the ones that were in the attic that he read. Where I think they're, because whenever he talks about horror influences, I mean, obviously there are writers that heavily influenced him, but he talks a lot about comic books.
Yeah.
When it comes to horror, he talks a lot about comic books and things of that nature, like stuff that was visual. Like he talks so much about movies, you know what I mean? Like when you read Danse Macabre, it's so much about film and radio and things like that. I think that was where the horror influence came from a bit more. I think when it comes to literature, he was reading so much crime, and that obviously, I mean, that pervades through the entirety of his work, but never more so pronounced, I think, than these early runs of books, a lot of the Bachman stuff, and then what he's up to over the last decade. You know what I mean? It's I feel like it's almost a full circle kind of thing. So, but yeah, I am very intrigued by the willingness with which he drops like so many different names. Jen, what were you going to say?
Well, there's like when I think about what makes a Bachman book, it's like there's an anger and there's a detachment, and I think a lot of that stems to like his addiction issues, which is something we talked about a lot in the Regulator's Desperation episodes. But there's also like, I feel like he kind of aspires to this emotional detachment, which is what to me characterizes a lot of Bachman is like, I feel like Bachman does not like his characters and Stephen King does. And I feel like, knowing that this was something his father left him, like I imagine there's an allure to letting go of that emotional attachment because emotions hurt sometimes. And that I feel like that's maybe what he's trying to do with Bachman. But the reason that I love King is because of that emotional connection. And I feel like Blaze is a Stephen King character and he's living in a Bachman world, like everything. I
think that's 100%
Blaze,
right.
Yeah. And it reminds me of like what he said about Ben Mears. Like he had this plot in mind and then Ben Mears wanted to be bigger and he wanted to be more. And that's kind of what I see with Blaze is it's like, I can feel Bachman and King like at war, and like when you switch back and forth between like the flashbacks, that feels like King, and the present, like we're dropping the ransom note, that feels like Bachman. And I really like this, I think, is like a final Bachman because it almost feels like he's putting him to rest in a way that I think like I feel like If It Bleeds is kind of like the end of a chapter and it's like him coming full circle with this phase of his career. That's kind of what I see Bachman, or that's what Blaze is doing,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I think that's a really good comparison, Jen. Like very apt understanding that this does feel like a Stephen King character existing outside his universe because I saw so much Tom Cullen in this and like what path Tom could have taken to perhaps end up as Blaze. Like I think those are sort of like twinner characters in a way.
Yeah, because Cullen is in a King book,
I think the anger is really key to it as well. And I think that there's so much, I mean, there's some of this in later books, but there's so much class resentment in Bachman work, and there's so much political anger, which makes total sense. I mean, he was writing these when he was really young. He was fresh out of college. Jen, in the archives, we have talked a lot about his political beliefs coming out of college, how they've evolved over the years. When he wrote a lot of these Bachman books, he was poor. Like he was, he, like he said, he was writing them on the back of milk receipts or sales slips, if you want to call them that. And he was that's where I think that anger came from, was the struggle of raising children and not knowing when, if you're going to be able to pay the electric bill that month, and also seeing tragedies in the news all the time, and then also seeing the rich take more, the poor get less. Like these were all things he was railing against when he was in college, and those sentiments are never more, I think, starkly obvious than in the Bachman works.
Yeah, but I think like writing now in 2007, King has put a lot of that anger to rest, which is why I feel like this book is ultimately kind of making peace with that anger. And that's why I think, I don't want to step on our character conversation, but like Blaze doesn't seem angry about his lot in life. It's like we are supposed to feel angry for him, and I almost kind of feel him like making peace, or he's writing it from a perspective of remembering that angry man, but not being that angry man.
Yeah. And it's especially like an angry young man.
Yeah,
I think really comes across, and that's like when I joke that this has like a Twitter draft element to it. It's the thing that you would tweet off, but then not send, and maybe sit on and be like, yeah, maybe I'm happy I didn't end up putting that out under my name,
and take some expletives out.
Exactly. Like it's whether it's railing against, as King can do sometimes, politics from a certain generation. Us looking in, we're like, oh, okay, this is how it sounds like when you pop off as like a, however you want to define his politics. But I feel like with this, you really do get the sense of like, yeah, it's an angry young man, and the fact that he had not yet made it, and maybe was resentful that he had not yet, made it in the mainstream. I do think there is like an undertone with this in a lot of the Bachman novels of there's an anger, but it stems from like a frustration of maybe not feeling like he got the spotlight yet that he so thinks he deserves, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into the question I wanted to ask about what elements of this feel like a young person's novel, Like, I think we've all had experience with writing to various degrees, and I will say, like, sentimentality is definitely something that I think is very prevalent in young writing or undeveloped writing. Because, Jen, you mentioned that You mentioned this about Blaze not being an angry character, that he's not as mad at the world as he could be. I agree with that. Where the youthfulness comes in is that he like wants us all to feel so sorry for Blaze.
Mhm.
And to me, it's like, I think when I look at Blaze, all I can think about is, you know, this guy, this big, dumb, but also kind of brilliant lug who just wants to be loved and who is slowly being broken, like, and what's the word I'm looking for? Like, he is experiencing a kind of rebirth by having this baby with him, right?
Mhm.
And I think King, who's very tall and very gangly, and you know, especially at this time, people described him as being a pretty large person. He took up a lot of space. I think about this being King sort of manifesting the brokenness he sees in himself on page. And this was around the time when he probably had, you know, Naomi was probably still a baby. I'm not sure if Joe was born by this point, but he wasn't too far off. I know that. And he was this guy who, you know, if you know your research about King in college, he was a pretty chaotic person. He was drunk all the time. He was writing all the time. He was very well known on campus. He posed in ads. He had the huge, crazy beard. He was kind of a big lug in his own way. I think he had a reputation for being a bit of like a whirling dervish. And so I think that he was reckoning with becoming an adult, becoming like quote unquote a real person. And so I think the tenderness with which he engages with this child and this desire to be understood and to be accepted and to be loved, all these things that Blaze are, while being completely shit on by the world around him, that is very much to me the kind of narrative of someone who is young and very insecure. And like I said, like, and also in the process of sort of discovering himself outside of that realm of college or wherever it is that he came from. I think a lot of that, that's where I get to that idea of like, and this is, I think, what he was laughing about in the intro about the over sentimentality and the laughing at it. Because I think sometimes if you portray a character as so put upon, it does become funny. But the thing is, that is our tendency when we're young and not fully emotionally developed, is to think that all the bad things are happening to us and us only. We feel sorry for ourselves, you know? And that to me is, I see that leaching into this story. And that to me is a very writerly sort of thing.
Yeah.
A young writer sort
Yeah.
of
And I think, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just gonna say, but I feel like the humor makes it not sentimental though. Like, I don't know. Because even when Blaze dies, I mean, this is such the bad version of this. I feel like if it was overly sentimental, it would be like, oh, and we need to say a prayer for Blaze or something stupid like that. Like, I
The
kind
doves
of
came laid on him.
I feel like the stripped down nature of the
for
prose.
Blaze would be, he was just being Blaze. Just Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
I feel like because the prose is so stripped down, how'd he phrase it in the intro? Like bare-faced or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what holds the sentimentality back, and that's what I love about it. I mean, hey, look, agree, disagree. Some people can spot genius from a mile away. Other people are gonna. No, I'm kidding, but like that to me is why it doesn't feel sentimental. But I hear what you guys are saying too.
Some of the sentimentality, though, I think does come across because obviously, like, there's the of Mice and Men comparison, but I saw a lot of the Jungle with like Yurkus, the sort of like big oaf that's trying to do well but just being crushed, and I think, as young writers go, they might be like, well, this is my take on Mice and Men. And you start to realize that like true artistry is not taking what already exists. You have to kind of carve out your own thing, not just, oh, what if I put a twist on this existing thing? And I feel like this novel, at least to me, comes across as this sort of like, well, let's think of Mice and Men and Lenny, but let's update it with, 1970s street rat. I don't even know. It just doesn't. But it feels like it takes like, it's like, oh, we're gonna take this existing sort of like archetype of this big dumb, oh, he's I mean, I don't know. I'm getting more upset now that I think about it too. Like usually like in Blazing Saddles, like Mongo, like the guy that punches the horse, right? And it's like, oh, he's big and dumb, but he's actually a sweetheart deep down, and that's.
Well, it's a trope, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a trope that I've seen over and over. So that's what takes away from some of this
Well, that's where I want to talk too, is that obviously there's archetypal things that writers use to, help familiarity and breed all those sorts of things. And then there's tropes, right? Like tropes that are sometimes, useful for a reason, but also sometimes over familiar to the point of stereotype. And I think a lot about the movie Barton Fink, when basically Barton Fink gets hired to write, quote unquote, a wrestling picture for Hollywood, which is the kind of thing they churn out every week over there. And they have a very standard script that they want for it. And they're like, okay, so you've got this big wrestler and he can either have a girlfriend and that softens him, or he has a young orphan street urchin child that helps soften him. And that's the arc. Like those are kind of the two options he's presented with in terms of how these templates work. And then when Barton says, I don't know, maybe he has both, like he's looked at like he's a complete idiot, because it's like, no, you don't deviate from the formula. And so I think when I read this story, and again, I'm not necessarily criticizing it, I'm just saying that the tropes here are adhered to, I think, a bit more fastidiously than they would have had King started from scratch with this story a little later. I mean, the crime aspects of this story are broad almost to the point of comedy, and I'm not sure it's all intentional comedy. I mean, these are the kind of gangsters who have names like Moochie and Hervey and like Bernie. It's like they all have I.E. Georgie, There was one that was really funny. Hold on. There was Moochie, and then there was one other name that was cracking me up. I'll find it eventually. But anyways, it's like and then when they're all hanging out in bars and stuff like that, it's like, hey, see? Yeah, Blaze, we're going to go rob them, see? It's like that kind of Dick Tracy kind of villain almost, which I think is like very much what King, that's the books that he references, the movies that he grew up watching, that was very much how these things were portrayed. And so he's definitely, leaning into those conscious or unconscious influences as they manifest here. So yeah, again, not a bad thing, but definitely something I think a more experienced writer would, and this is what I think you're getting at, Flieger, a more experienced writer, somebody who had been through this a little more, would find the archetypal use of these things rather than the stereotypical use of these things. Like take the trope and help transcend it rather than sort of recycle it, which I think kind of happens here a little bit.
100% agreed. It turns the criminal underworld into the weasels from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yes, the weasels. I was thinking that. I love the weasels, by the way.
I do too.
And that restaurant scene reminds me of the writing exercise that he writes about in On Writing. I kept finding myself thinking, like smelling the onions, And that's, I think, what makes this feel like a younger, not necessarily a younger man's work, but like a younger King novel. Like the playground bully scene reminds me a lot of the one in Salem's Lot. Like Moochie Welch is a character from Christine, who I love. So love it just Moochie. Feels like, from the mindset of young King,
Whenever I hear Moochie, I think of that Seinfeld episode, Kenny Rogers with the chicken restaurant. And then he's like, I only knew you through Moochie.
Bad chicken, mess you up.
Okay. The only other thing I'll say about work of a young writer, and this is because it drives me crazy, and I am guilty of this, so I am certainly not judging anyone, but something I've noticed that happens in a lot of early work by people is the whole trope of a dead person haunting the protagonist and kind of following them around, commenting on the action, commenting on what they're doing. I think it's sort of an easy way, I think, for a writer to manifest the doubts that a character is having, or the fears or the anxieties that a character is having. Rather than find more organic ways to show those things, you literally bring a character into the world who only they can see, who represents all of those things. I don't think it's a bad thing, and sometimes it can be utilized really well, but it is a trope that I have certainly utilized in my earliest work, and I think that like Kath, I'm sure you've probably encountered this at some point, like in the early days of your writing, or at least just somebody who worked on a lot of new plays.
The wisecracking ghost.
Wisecracking ghost.
Yeah,
man.
you love it. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've ever had a wisecrack. I'm sure I've done a bunch of dumb shit.
Well, here's the thing. I prefer the wisecracking ghost to the ghost that like I've seen plays and stuff where like it's like the ghost is just always sad, and like it's like your brother who killed himself or something, and he's always there looking at you with sad eyes. So his
Oh
ghost
yeah,
is always
I've done that.
I hate that shit.
I had that.
I've done it too.
My very first full length play I had, which was like a dark version of the Nativity story. I had this shepherd who like literally sees his dead wife with like a noose around her neck, like walking around being
Nice.
sad and shit.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
that's
I've
pretty
definitely
cool,
done
though.
that. Yeah,
The
that
noose is
imagery was
good.
kind of the imagery was cool, but I wouldn't ever write
Can
that.
I just say,
today,
because
you know?
I did the audiobook for this one, and it's Ron McClarty, I think.
Mhm.
But when he would do George, it sounded so much like George Carlin. It's just so funny. He'd be like, hey, it was just so
Mickey Mouse says that.
Yes.
Yeah. Not well, and like if I think about Lisi's story, which is another book about a dead character that looms very large over the protagonist, I feel like that is a much more mature take on that trope of like grief and letting go of somebody that was really important to you. And here he literally is in the room, you know.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about crime fiction a little bit. So King's always had a penchant for crime stories, obviously. Did you guys know he published a crime story called The Fifth Quarter under the name John Swithin back in the day?
I didn't know it was by Swithin, but that is in Nightmares and Dreamscapes, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he published
right, yeah.
it. Yeah, before, like in his earlier years, to a men's magazine or something, and he
It's read by Gary Sinise in the audiobook.
Oh, nice.
Mm.
Love
Probably
Lieutenant
pretty good,
Dan.
yeah.
I guess I'm curious, like, how does this sort of like when you, because Dan, you mentioned, or Caps, like you mentioned his other crime novel stuff, and I know not all of you have read all of his later crime stuff, but something like Colorado Kid, something like Billy Summers, something like the Mr. Mercedes books, or even something like Omni's Last Case, which isn't that also in Nightmares and Dreamscapes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like how do you guys sort of stack Blaze alongside those? Do you prefer it, or
I prefer
like,
it.
Yeah,
Here's why. And it's funny because it has a ghost in it, which feels like the most Kingian thing he can do. But I feel like with a lot of these other crime novels, Joyland, Colorado Kid, Omni's Last Case, whatever, crime stories, he, even the Mercedes trilogy, he always starts off committing to the hard-boiled thing, and then he kind of kings his way out of it by the end.
absolutely.
And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he does that here, despite there being a ghost. A, because the ghost is present from the beginning, and because it's not an actual ghost. at
It's
least
not
I
an
don't
actual
think.
ghost, yeah.
And I like what y'all said about stereotypes versus archetypes, and he is probably guilty of veering into the former for sure. But that still at least does show a baseline knowledge of what you're riffing on, right? And I agree with you guys. Yes, there are times where he is emulating rather than innovating, right? But that is more satisfying to me than the Hodges trilogy, and I know we haven't gotten to it yet, so I won't spoil too much. And I don't even hate the events that happen in the Hodges trilogy eventually, but it really does feel like he's going, okay, this is my version of the first person noir narration, blah blah blah. And then by the end, he just is like, I gotta.
Yeah,
I
he
gotta
really
do
just
a
tears
thing.
that thing to shreds.
Like
yeah.
he just feels like he can't help himself in some of that. And I actually do like that balance in Joyland, but it is that same thing. It feels like it starts one way and then it's like, but I gotta do this. You know, he just kind of
Mhm.
leaps off the cliff here. And I just think that when I said the prose had restraint and patience and all that here, I think that's why I meant he never lets himself go full king. He's staying in
Yeah.
that Bachman mode. So for me, it's like my favorite of his crime novels.
And I think you're 100% correct when you say like the restraint, and like he really does commit to the bit here. Like,
Mhm.
and I think that
Yeah,
that
that's a
is
good
an
way to put it.
element that makes it Bachman-y. You know what I mean? Is that he doesn't take that. Yeah, he doesn't take, like at the end when there's all the birds and everything, it doesn't turn into a dark half situation. The
Yeah.
birds just sort of
Spare.
exist. Yeah, they
Mhm.
just sort of exist as whatever they want to exist as, which we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, Jen, how about you? Like how would you stack up this one to some of the other crime stories?
I would put it right alongside that. I think kind of what I agree with Dan, like it just, I don't care about the crime elements of the story. What I care about is the characters. And it's like, when I think about 11/22/63, like that to me is not a time travel book. That's a book about a teacher, like falling in love. And that's kind of like, this book to me is not about the crime. It's about Blaze himself. So I don't know if it's just that and the Colorado Kid is same. It's like, that's about life in rural Maine. And that's what I love about it. Billy Summers to me is about this relationship. And so I like it a lot because it's more than a crime novel. And I don't want to say that reductively. The crime element is my least favorite part of it, you know?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll say I was least invested, I think, in this book, like during the scene, like when he kidnaps the baby, right? That
Yeah.
scene for me, That was a sign where I guess I saw a younger King as well, because that sequence to me was not as compelling as he's very good at writing action sequences. I mean, that's something that, you know, we see very often in his later stuff. He, especially as he has more movies produced, he becomes much more of a cinematic writer. That's something we've definitely talked about. He doesn't have that here. He doesn't have that cinematic quality. There's like kind of a leaden quality, a thudding quality to, I think, the sort of action sequence of the actual kidnapping of the baby that alienated me, I think, to some degree. But the flashbacks, and King himself said this, he goes, I think I was really more drawn to the flashbacks than the actual crime story here. I agree. I think the sequences of him in the boarding school, of him on the Bowie farm, of him at the what is it, the blueberry picking where he was driving the truck, like that sequence was probably my favorite in the whole book. You know, those sequences were fantastic. Even just him, how he met George and how that relationship played out, that's where the most heart was, and that's where I felt most connected to Blaze. And I think that for me, that is the element that works really well for me. And I'm with you, Jenna, it's kind of true for his other ones too. I will say, like Billy Summers, the parts of that, like I will say he's gotten so much better at that point with writing action that I think those were action set pieces that I was a lot more invested in, but I was never more invested. You know, it was the central relationships that always keep me kind of most invested. And he still had that even in this early book, which is really impressive. So,
yeah. Well, and I think that's what I like to stack this up against the Mercedes trilogy and The Outsider, which I kind of see as an extension of that, is like, I like this because I feel like he lets himself go there in a way that I think with the Hodges trilogy, he's really trying. And even though like it gets a little go for go-y and it leans into the horrific, like I feel like he's really trying to make that crime. And I like when he just kind of lets the sentimentality hang out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else think about Raising Arizona?
I was just about to say that, Randall.
We are the stock in the head. Yeah.
Well, just like the whole stealing the baby and like the clumsiness. And as you said that, like I was trying to think of a way to bring that into the description here, but that's such a funny scene that I can go back and watch again and again. And something about the baby kidnapping here just didn't hit me quite the same. Yeah. And I don't know. I guess I don't want to like poo-poo it too much, but yeah, I was very let down by a lot of elements. Well, I still enjoyed reading this novel, but when you compare it, you're like, oh, this reminds me of this other thing that executed this much more gracefully. That's
I mean, ultimately, I know what you mean. Like, I had the same thought where the criminal elements, like the actual caper of Blaze is basically, 30% Raising Arizona. Like Raising Arizona is one of my favorite comedies of all time, and it's so great. And so yeah, it was hard for me to not compare that, which is again why I think that the flashback sequences were what worked for me the most.
And I will say, because like I read a lot of crime, but more like mafia veering, and I don't like crime fiction. But I also had to take like a lot of criminal procedure and criminal law classes, and you see it's much less romantic in real life, and there are actually elements of like criminal law that are peppered throughout here. For example, like the grandmother giving a dying declaration. That's an exception to hearsay, where you can't normally have a person make a statement and then bring it into court unless that person can then be questioned. However, there's an exception if you reasonably believe you are about to have impending death. Like say a car hit you and you're like, the driver was wearing a hat. The law will assume like, okay, you didn't say this to gain because you thought you were going to die, right? And there are various other elements that are peppered in, but it reminds me though of like a first year law student versus a third year, and this reminds me a lot of like a entry level creative writing student versus a seasoned writer, and it kind of like you can kind of see through the gaps and a little bit, I guess.
You're saying the suspect is hatless. Repeat. Suspect is
suspect
hatless.
is hatless. Directly under the sun now.
Let's talk about masculinity a little bit. I think the Bachman books are, we've talked. I know we talked about that a lot with Rage and with Long Walk, and obviously those elements are present in Road Work and in The Running Man, and even in Thinner. I think Thinner is also a book about appearance in a lot of ways, like wanting to present a strong figure to the world as a man. And so I think that, this idea of manhood, masculinity, what makes a man, what defines male friendship, those are all elements that are present in Bachman. Do we see any of that here as well? Like, what do you guys think this has to say about masculinity, and especially as it relates to parenthood? I'm looking your way, Mr. Caffrey.
Well, I think, I don't know. This might sound like such a basic, macho observation, but I feel, y'all mentioned before, okay, Jen talked about how this is a king character in a Bachman novel, which I think is a really great observation. And throughout the book, there's almost no chance for Blaze. Like, he never has a chance to make it, right? And he's presented it several times with actually having these pretty vulnerable, intimate relationships with other men who are all very similar. Like, John is very similar to George in many ways. He's not as mean as George, but this idea of pairing up with someone who has a little bit more street smarts than him, who's smaller, who's meaner, etc. But much like Of Mice and Men, there's a tenderness to all of those male relationships that he has, but they're all doomed. Like, all those guys die, and then Blaze dies eventually himself. He tries to have this somewhat vulnerable, intimate relationship with this baby. The same thing, that it's doomed, right? So if it is saying anything about it, I guess maybe it's that, at least in this world, in Bachman's world, in this world of crime, traditional masculinity does prohibit the ease of vulnerability between two men. And once again, that's like a kind of a basic thing, right? Like,
I think it's true, though. Yeah,
I don't think men have a hard time expressing their. Well, I shouldn't say, because they don't have a hard time expressing their feelings in this. The world just kind of kills them for it, if that makes sense. That would be my read on that.
You're reading my mind, Andrew Tate, Top G.
Oh, God, here we go. Jesus Christ! Didn't he come up
Top
on
G
another
graduate.
Podcast recently?
Hopefully never again. No, but
yeah.
And I agree with what you're saying, Caffrey. That there's a complexity too with. I mean, I don't know. It reminded me a lot of like Midnight Cowboy, the John relationship.
Yeah,
with, like Ratso. It's sort of like taking this person that has this asset, which in his case is like he's a big hulking strong guy, right? But then kind of putting like the brains with the brawn and scheming together. And Blaze, even though he is like this big strong man, you do realize like inside he kind of never stopped being a kid, right? He approaches the world with almost like an innocence that's childlike, not just with his intelligence, but even just he doesn't seem to get down on himself, maybe because it's been beaten out of him, but he doesn't ever really complain. He just sort of endures it. And I think that is a trope of masculinity, like the sort of, not the strong silent type per se, but he can endure it. But deep down, like you see, he is like troubled. And the times in the novel that are the most fun is like when he is actually happy. And people look at him and they have assumptions just based on his size. But even, I think there's like a taxi driver that makes a reference, or when he's hitchhiking, the trucker, and he's like, "You get that?" And Blaze is just like, "Yeah, I get it." Even when he doesn't get these references, he's just so willing to like please those around him versus like rock the boat and maybe go out on his own and have his own opinions.
Well, you could argue also that the cause of his problems is an act of super male toxic aggression, right? Like it's his fucking asshole drunk dad throwing him down the stairs multiple times. And I'll just say this. I told you guys all this right before the podcast. I had to take, my son's fine, but I had to take him to the ER tag because I dropped him on his head by accident, or I wasn't holding him and he fell off the bed. I don't bring that for like brownie sentimental points, whatever else. I'm just saying that I was so scared about that, and he was fine, right? And Blaze's dad fucking wails him down the stairs several times, right? And I just read this book, so I was immediately thinking like, oh my God, what happened to him? He was fine, blah, blah, blah. But like that, you could see the seriousness of having that head injury, right? And Blaze's dad does that on purpose to him. And had Blaze been equipped with maybe some more conventional smarts, he maybe would have had the savvy to make those other male relationships he has work. Like he maybe could have not gotten so much into a life of crime with George, or if he had, he could have had the wherewithal to know when something was going to go south. So it's like weird. His dad kind of ruins his chance of ever succeeding in that world, and it's an act of aggression that's also perpetuated by the types of guys that Blaze is going to interact with in his life.
I was going to say, like, I think a lot of it is about the one good role model he has, right, is the farmer, like the blueberry guy. And then It's like this is where it is funny, where it's like,
Yeah.
wow, this one man who sees me for my talents and actually likes me and is offering me a job in a future. Oops, he died. You know,
Yeah.
It's like almost comical.
That was by that point, like I was like, okay, so clearly this is not going to work out,
Right.
obviously. But it's just like, and
but
even
that's
that
the thing
character
is
is
that
like,
sequence is so well written that you really like you're rooting for it, but it is doomed. And I think that, but I think you guys are also right. Just this self-perpetuating, like confluence of bad influences, people who encourage him to be his worst. Like you think about the headmaster at the school who essentially, harasses him to the point that he like has to kick the shit out of him. It's like, his only way, going to that dog farm and how abusive they are to all of him, the way that they treat him and what they think he's good for and what he isn't. They don't treat him like a person. They just treat him like another dog. And then obviously George is a very negative influence, somebody who is funny. I mean, I really related to this because I had a very bad habit early in my life of being really close with guys who I thought were hilarious, but who were horrible to me. Like they treated me like shit, but I kind of hung around them because they made me laugh. And, when they were fun, they were great. And like, I feel like King does a fantastic job of setting up why Blaze is drawn to George. Like it makes sense. It's not like George is this like perpetually abusive, evil person. Like you do see why they have fun and why they get along. And then eventually, since Blaze is somebody who, kind of sinks into that sidekick role, and ends up becoming comfortable there when he does have that capacity to be something more, but he's never really has people in his life to encourage that in him. But then it's sort of, that's what the baby does in the end, right? Like, the end is really, it's really about Blaze kind of like trying to be the one caring for someone else in the end. Like that, if you want to talk about his self-actualization or his moment of ascension in this book, it ends with this imagery of birds, and I think birds can symbolize a lot of things, but one of the things I think they can symbolize is a sort of ascension or a sense of life, of coming to life, even in death. And so it's, I think that he is finding himself as an individual, as somebody who is capable of caring in that final moment. And I think that's sort of the journey I think that Blaze goes on throughout the book, at least for me. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think he has to really kind of remove himself from the world to find that, because what he finds is really his strength is like this nurturing quality that he has. And I found myself thinking like, what in another world, what would it be like if Blaze could be like a daycare worker or like a caretaker kind of role? And I mean, maybe that would have been what his life on the farm would have been more like, but we just don't live in a world that lets big, tall men do that in a lot of ways. I mean, and more so now than when King wrote this. But I also see like the parenting side of this, like his father is like the anti-Blaze, and like, that happens because his father is a drunken asshole, but also because his mother died and because there is no nurturing like element in the house. And I imagine his father was probably dealing with a lot of grief, having to deal with that too. And if you have never been raised in a society that said that men can be nurturing, and all of a sudden you don't have a nurturer in your house and you've got to raise this kid, then I could understand wanting to drink more. Or I'm not justifying anything his dad does, but yeah, that feels like a created scenario by the culture that we live in, and like when we look at like Blaze before that, like he was really studious and he was like really into books, and then talking about what his son would become. Like I wonder what Blaze could have been without his father,
Yeah, and I think, and I'll give King credit for this too, that Blaze trying to be more of like a nurturing parent, because even like I believe in the hostage note he references like, don't worry, like you guys need to grease him more so his rash doesn't come.
I'll tell you what the good stuff is.
He's giving the care that he sort of always deserved as a kid. And I credit King though without explicitly stating it, but it's, if he was to be a parent, this is the childhood maybe that he would have liked to have had, and he's trying really hard. But I was still waiting for that like Will Smith Fresh Prince moment where it's like, how come he don't love me, man? Like just waiting for him to be like, why did my dad not treat me this way? And I, again, credit to King for not explicitly following that and stating it. Instead, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, he could have been good, and maybe had he been raised this, tender loving care, he wouldn't turn out the way he did.
Here's a question for you guys. I'm just thinking before what Randall said about Bachman being concerned with issues of class and specifically the anger that comes from the lower class. In the end, we see this, this letter from baby Joe. Is that the baby's name? Joe, right?
Yeah,
baby's-
because it's the same as the kid in the stand.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
think about that.
Yeah. Mhm.
But we see a letter from his actual parents and everything. Now, granted, he's probably going to have a pretty good life because they come, their money or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think at all King is getting at, he's going to be raised by a bunch of phonies and Blaze would have been the better father or any? I don't know. Was there any? Probably not, right? Because Blaze is still a criminal. But like,
Yeah,
there
I'd like
was
to-
this sort of like,
yeah.
I don't know. There was this sort of like rich kid hoity-toityness that I feel like he was maybe
absolutely.
playing with a little bit, as opposed to like the like it was
When you're
almost
that
like
age, you're really concerned with authenticity, right?
yeah, exactly. So I was just wondering that because in many ways you could argue that Joe gives Blaze the chance to treat a kid like Blaze wasn't treated by his father, right? Like to make up for that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if Blaze has the intellectual ability to actually make that work or not. King probably wasn't putting too fine a point on it. He may have just been having some fun with taking the piss out of the upper class. But
Yeah.
I was wondering that a little bit.
And George is like, he's going to grow up to be a kid that, wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire kind of thing. And there's that resentment. And then I think that King is trying to explore the idea of like, no, but he's still a baby and he's innocent here. But then also, and sadly with like his character as well, like with Blaze, even when he like wraps the baby, he wraps him too tight and it starts to almost like smother him. So like, despite his best efforts, he's still not suitable to be a caretaker, right? He puts him down by the fire alone and is like, oh, don't worry, I pinned the blanket down so he can't escape. And it's these kind of like clumsy attempts to show care and protective, but he never developed
Well,
that
yeah, those are just
skill
instincts
set.
that were never cultivated in
Right.
him. And it's
he
like,
tries,
yeah.
but he can't do it.
Right.
Well, and I think like there's an interesting shift at the end too. And I would have loved like a Mist type ending where like the baby is actually killed in the shootout and then
wow.
because of the FBI and then they blame it on Blaze. I feel like that would have been like maybe a true Bachman like punch in the gut.
Yeah,
Because
I feel like, yeah, you're right. That would have been a total Bachman ending.
It's dark thoughts,
Yeah.
Jen. Dark thoughts.
I know.
Dark
But, like,
Jen has entered the chat room.
Dark Jen back in action. Yeah.
I mean, she never truly left, but but yeah, he like becomes the protector of this baby, but he also is the one that is putting this baby in danger also, but it's because of trying to be who he thought George wanted him to be and I think there's a part of it that's grief dealing with the loss of George, but also this is who George told me to be and I'm being good by being this. So it's this understanding of what a man is, but then finding himself like becoming like, men can be fathers and men can be nurturers and like Mr. Mom I love that movie. It's probably dated, but like, I love the idea that he finds like his true calling in taking care of this baby. And I think to compare it with his parents, like there is this element of like Joe is one of the few people that actually sees Blaze, but that Blaze actually sees Joe too, even though he puts him in a lot of danger. And I'd imagine if King was also staying up all night and, getting up and feeding and taking care of the kids when Tabby was walking to Dunkin' Donuts at 4 a.m. and being like, man, these rich people that have nannies that they can do it. Like, I love my kids. I'm doing this. I'm like bleeding every day. Like I feel a little of that tension too, like the love comes from the attempt and how hard it is for Blaze to care for this kid.
Right. Any other thoughts on the Hook before we move on to probably a quick little detour in structure and format? Jen?
I just want to say I had never thought about Bachman books tackling masculinity, and I absolutely love that. I'm gonna.
We'll
be
talk
reading
more about
them all
it.
again.
Yeah, we'll talk more about it
So
later
say,
this month.
hell yes, King.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Other than the Regulators, which is kind of an ensemble piece, it's all like troubled men, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
Lot of
we're
bad
pretty
boys.
tight in the
Bach-
head of some real bad boys. Yeah.
Bachman's for the
Yeah.
boys. No, I'm kidding, kidding, just kidding.
Bachman's for the
Hell
Blaze.
yes.
Blaze is
Blaze being Blaze.
It's Blaze being Blaze.
All right, let's move on to structure and format.
Look at me.
Okay. In structure and format, we talk about stylistic choices, structure, format, all those things, voice. Dan, you had mentioned that there was a style trope that you got frustrated with, perhaps, near the back half of the book. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was going to save it for Misery because I really don't have a lot of prose that I didn't like, but I'll talk about it now. It's that I think the book, for the most part, I think King threads the needle really well with the back and forth nature of everything, with the getting kind of Blaze's story in chronological order, then mixed with the current events with Joe. The one problem, for me anyway, that he runs into is that George is such a presence throughout, but we really don't get the George Blaze story till the very end, like in the last 10 pages, really. And that kind of bugged me a little bit. And I don't know, I guess if we were going to spend more time with them, King would have had to deviate from that format, and we would have had to have known him earlier, and he would have had to have done more of a Lisi story kind of fractured thing. But I felt like we know George is dead, and I was kind of waiting for the George saga. Like I knew we were going to meet him eventually in the past tense, and I just wanted that to be longer and meatier than it was. And by the time we get to it, it's pretty much they meet each other, they both go to prison, they have the card game, and that's kind of it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I felt a little shortchanged by that at the end, because it just felt like if the whole thing is that the past is kind of keeping up with the present in terms of scope, which I feel like most of the novel is doing. It's almost like this parallel structure thing it has going on. You almost want the whatever happened with Blaze and George to be just as exciting as the final shootout at the end with Joe, and it's just not. It almost feels like it undercuts him as a character, and that all we know is the ghost George. So I feel like it was this thing where King had adopted this back and forth structure that I really liked, but then it worked against him in the end just because of where George comes in that chronology.
Yeah, where he comes in the chronology.
Yeah, I don't know
agree.
if you guys felt similarly. Yeah,
I feel like this might contribute to how you felt, Flieger, about this feeling a little bit unfinished, because there is a rushed quality to, I think, the last third of this book. And that, to me, strikes me also, again, I think, as a younger writer sort of thing. He was so close to the end. He's like sprinting towards the end was a little bit, I think, how it feels like, because it really does feel like he's like, okay, I'm trying to get fucking published. I can't sit on this all day. I've just got to I got to finish this shit. And it's funny because one of my main complaints, and I think one of our main complaints as we've gone through the King canon over these years, is just, God damn, you could have cut 200 pages out of this. This is one of those books where I'm like, I could have done 50 more of this, because it moves so quickly. It's such a smooth read, and it's already really short. You know, I feel like this was a place where I would have loved to spend a little more time with George. So I totally agree with you on that. Jen, what are you going to say?
I feel like I'm the opposite. I would have taken those George chapters out. Probably not actually taken them out, but I did not care anything about George. Partly because I think the voice of George was so off-putting on this audiobook. Like, I did not want to spend any time with him. But I also think like the way that structurally it really worked for me, because by the time we meet George, we're in the end game, and I can't remember if he has actually gotten to the cave yet, or if he's still kind of in the law's office. But like by the time he meets George, we already know he's not going to make it out of here. And so I kind of like that that's when George comes into his life, is that it's not really a piece of the story anymore. It feels like an epilogue to this life, you know?
It's all part of the end. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. One thing I did notice, I think, just in terms of noticing a particular Kingian kind of trope, is the way that one thing that King's so good at is when he does, because when he's doing his third person stuff like he is here, he's able to shift whenever he kind of is orbiting over a particular character. He's able to so smoothly sort of shift his narrative voice so it mirrors the character that he's kind of focused on in that moment. And I'll say he even had that quality even in this book. I'm not sure how much of it was maybe added by King, like in his rewrites, or, you know, if it was something that was there all along. But that's something I've always loved about King, is his very malleable sort of third person omniscient voice. Although there are moments, how did you guys feel a little bit? Because he does his foreshadowing thing, right? Like in later books. In this, he really loves the idea of being the godlike narrator. Like he loves to zoom out a little bit. And I have one section I'll read in Heroes and Villains that touches on this. But I think about like the woman that he sleeps with at the camp, who he ends up impregnating, and we learn just that he has this baby out there. Like, that is not information we need by any means, but that I think is King sort of relishing being that third person omniscient.
I liked it when it was instances like that. Not so much when it was like, oh, so and so would be dead, and just because he does that so much, but I really enjoyed that, because what that showed, if we're going back to the parenthood idea and what Blaze could have been in another world, what Blaze could have been if his father hadn't dropped him on his head and had status. We see that in that baby, because the whole idea is supposed to be that Blaze actually is very intelligent. He was intelligent until his father dropped him, and I think because we get to know about how this child he didn't know about got adopted and ended up being very successful and smart and everything. That to me, I mean, plays into the tragedy of it. Like we get, it's kind of dramatic.
I was going to say, it's like, it's also the class resentment to some degree, because it's about like, this whole book is like, what could he have accomplished if he had the resources, right?
Exactly.
Like
Right.
if he was raised in a different world with different people, like I feel like that to me reeks of like his own struggles. Cause obviously he grew up really poor. He grew up without a dad. Like he really struggled in those he was working at a fucking laundry. Like it was not
lived in
fun
a
for
trailer
him.
with like
Yeah, he
two
lived in a
kids,
trailer,
and I like that. I liked when we had even just the little things like the drops of AB blood, because then you're like, okay, Blaze is gonna get caught, and he
that was interesting. Yeah,
because I enjoyed this. King does this. He plays, at least for me, he played with like, oh, maybe Blaze could get away, but then he drops these little forensic details, and then we cut to the other side with the cops examining it or whatever, and you're like, oh no, he's fucked, and that was interesting to me. But anyway, what about Jen or Flieger?
Well, just going back to the Coen brothers, it did remind me of in Big Lebowski when there's like, well, there's a little Lebowski on the way, and how there's like this other life that you're like, well, maybe that one will be okay, that sort of thing. But I will say, just with in terms of structure, the jumping to Blaze's past and then sort of his present predicament, I didn't mind that. Like I kind of like going back and forth until the end, though, when he was kind of running. And then it cuts back, and I almost felt like that killed a lot of the momentum of the final kind of confrontation with the police and being hunted down. That was the one part of the structure that kind of threw me off. I just didn't like it. I thought they lost a lot of the momentum that the story was building toward by suddenly just like departing and talking. I think it might have been like talking about the farm or further details on that. And just in terms of structure, that's something that did throw me off as well.
Yeah. Jen?
I kind of liked that section. It reminded me of the like one of the sections in Firestarter where like the OJ cop or the shop agents are like tracking Andy and Charlie down, and we keep like popping into them, and it's got this like really faceless feds kind of vibe to it but it also kind of like tied into my whole kind of read of it as just like it really pits Blaze against the world, and that's what I do like about it. But I can see your point as that it does kind of get a little confusing, like where we are in the story.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that Blaze versus the world aspect of it, but I think one thing I like about Firestarter is those guys like OJ and them, they do have like more clearly defined personalities. Right. Like they are characters a little bit more. That was one thing I struggled with in this is also where it felt a little rushed to me. Those detectives and cops all kind of blended together for me. I wasn't getting a lot of like, one of their names. Yeah. Whereas like King is usually so good at henchmen, you know what I mean? Like, giving us really like distinct henchmen. So that's obviously a skill that he developed later. Like, there is like a version again where there was like 50 more pages or 100 more pages, and we got a little more George, and we got a little more like, I don't know, intensity or insight with these detectives and stuff like that. Could have been cool. Not necessary, but it is an interesting what if. So any other thoughts here before we move on? Cool. Let's do Heroes and Villains.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
Okay, Heroes and Villains. Not a lot here. We're mainly here to talk about Blaze. There was some interesting sections, I think, where we got some... Like, I don't think King is particularly interested in like digging into Blaze's mind in the same way as he is with like characters in later books. But we get some moments that I think are interesting. Let me find the right page here. 186 and 187. And I think this ties a little bit to what we were saying about foreshadowing, but so this is when he was putting on like a disguise. And he said he vaguely realized he was actually making himself more conspicuous rather than less but maybe that was all right. What else could he do anyway? He couldn't help being 6 foot whatever. All he could do was try and make his looks work for him rather than against him. He certainly didn't realize that he had done a better job of disguise than George ever could have. No more than he realized that George was now the creation of a mind working at a feverish, half-crazed pitch below the burnt-out surface of stupidity. For years, he had identified himself as a dummy, coming to accept it as just one more part of his life, like the dent in his forehead. Yet something continued to work away beneath the burnt-out surface. It worked with the deadly instinct of living things, moles, worms, microbes, beneath the surface of a burnt-over meadow. This was the part that remembered everything, every hurt, every cruelty, every bad turn the world had done him. I found the burnt-over thing interesting because it felt to me like a stab at giving weight or meaning to the nickname, like Blaze itself. Like, did you guys feel like there was
that?
But did you think that there was meaning to Blaze, or was it just like on Burning Love there's a character named Blaze?
Blaze being Blaze.
I thought it was just a character named Blaze, and getting a gangster shorthanded, I guess, like the Moochie kind of thing. But it is weird because Blaze doesn't really suit him as a nickname. I feel like his nickname should be like Ox or something like that.
Or Tiny.
Yeah, Tiny,
Yeah.
exactly.
See, that's how I felt too.
Huh,
I'm
that's
like,
interesting.
There's got to be a significance to this name, or at least I don't know it, because it just seems so like, even when he's in school, or like when he gets that nickname when he's in the boys' home, I don't think they ever explain like why they started calling him that.
It's just because his last name is Blaisdell, I think. Like, that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Now
I
I'm
think.
You didn't get
stupid.
that was.
Well, no, but I mean, I do think like, and okay, I was distracted by this because when I taught, I had a student named Blaze who.
Oh, okay. I
know.
feel like it's a more popular name these days.
It is now, yeah. I'm not going to identify anymore about this real person who lives. Anyways,
Jen,
but,
I'm
like,
sure we can find out who this is.
Wait, let's
Well,
dox him. Yeah.
Let's just say he reminded me of this character Blaze in a lot of ways. But like, I feel like when I think of what a blaze is, there's like an inevitable quality to it. Like, that's not a fire you're going to be able to put out. It's going to have to take its course. And so I guess if I were to try to like put that nickname on what feels like a really sensitive character, once we get to know him, it's like the damage has been done and his fate is sealed to a certain extent, which I think is kind of like the scorched earth kind of vibes,
Well, that's what I think this piece is getting at, is like,
Mhm.
maybe it appears that way to other people, like that this guy is scorched earth.
Yeah.
But that there is like this thing that is still up. There is like this hope or this potential that
Mhm.
still kind of simmers beneath all of it.
Still human.
Fire is still burning inside. I was gonna say, just in
Mhm.
terms of, obviously Blaze being Blaze is the go-to, but
Blaze being Blaze.
the only other pop culture Blaze I can really think of is Blaze Fielding in Streets of Rage. If anyone played that video game, that's the female character.
Oh,
Blaze.
yeah. Right. Oh, I love Streets of Rage. Yeah, that
Streets
was
of Rage
cool.
2, they just re-released it.
It's
in
two
updated
is
edition.
the one with Max the wrestler, right? That's cool.
And
Skates. Skates, awesome. What about who had the kangaroo? That was the third one.
Well, that was the third one. Max was the big guy, but I always like Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
The only other Blaze I can think of is Johnny Blaze from Ghost Rider. But
Pizza place.
There's a Blaze in Top Chef, Richard Blaze.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
really?
I trash him constantly when I used to review Top Chef. No, I was gonna say the only other Blaze I saw in pop culture was Undercover Boss, which I used to hate watch like crazy. There was a guy I think it was the guy who ran Yankee Candle, and he was undercover in a Yankee Candle store, and it was like. And then the guy who was training him was this like 21-year-old kid named Blaze, but he was such a fucking dork. Like he had like he was not cool, and it seemed really bizarre. I'm like, anyone named Blaze needs to be cool. Like they had to have a cool haircut. Like, that is the name of a guy who rides a motorcycle. And this kid was such a geek, but he was also so bad at his job. And let's just say the Undercover Boss was not happy with his performance. So
there's it's that Ethan Hawke movie I mentioned. He directed it. He's not in it. Called Blaze, which is about this underground country musician Blaze Foley. So there's that. It looks like it's streaming on Tubi. Highly recommend it.
Love Tubi.
One of my favorite movies of 2018. But Randall, you didn't. I'm not trying to pick on you, but you didn't get that Blaisdell was the last name. Like you didn't make that connection.
I think
there?
I got too hung up thinking about meaning that I missed the obvious thing.
Gotcha.
You know?
No, it makes sense.
I'm sure I skimmed that because I know that's in there. I just like when you get a nickname and then the book's called Blaze, I was like, and then I think especially when I saw that section I just read where it's talking about this burnt out idea, like that to me is I just start thinking about what he's getting at, and I think that was something. This is maybe, and that's maybe not like the best way to read, is to try to be finding meaning in everything, because I think like when I was reading the end as well, the birds that he sees as he dies, I'm like Googling what do birds mean, you know what I mean? Because I'm like, there's not an elegance to the way that he's presenting these metaphors or these motifs that he's toying with, like there is in later books, or maybe not even. I mean, not even. It reminds me of like Dreamcatcher, right? Like where there's a Dreamcatcher and he's sort of trying to justify why he's using it, but we all came out of that episode not really like fully connected on what the Dreamcatcher meant, and so it's like I think that's how I feel a little bit about these things.
I think you were spot on though about the bird and like the significance, because like even in the Bible, right, it's Noah's Ark and the dove brings a branch to signify like there is life, right? So I do think whether it's being, you know, spirited off to the afterlife or just instilling the idea of like a
like
new
freedom,
it's like a new chapter. So I think you're right with that. Whether you got the Blaze thing or not, don't worry about that. That's
It's a phoenix rising from the blazing ashes, you know. I do wonder if maybe some of the birds thing was maybe more of the sentimentality that he took out, you know. And
well, see, that's why
earlier draft, you know.
That's why I said earlier, like he only did the first 100 pages rewritten, because all the bird stuff at the end is. I think that's where, you know, Caffrey, I think that's like what I was thinking of was all that bird stuff, because that goes on for like 2 pages, and I'm like, I get it. He's seeing birds. He's dying. Like, his soul's being transferred to the fucking bird. I get it. It's gonna sit over the kid's crib.
Spoiler alert! I thought that last paragraph about the birds was beautiful. It's in my word processor of the gods. I'm gonna fucking read it tonight. I don't care what you all say.
It'll be a bird. It'll be a bird with Blaze's face and a dented forehead, and then it'll sit next to a bird with Mother Abigail's face, and they'll sit over the crib.
What is she saying at the end? Is she just saying like little baby or something like that? So funny.
So yeah, there's that, and then but no, I don't know. I think it's like the Blaze archetype too is interesting to me. Like it's like a Forrest Gump character, right? Like where he is clearly, you know, quote unquote slow, but he doesn't really want to commit to, you know, is this actually some kind of ailment, you know, in the larger sense of like, is he mentally disabled or isn't he? Like, you know, like when King even said in his Different Seasons thing, when he described the book, he described Blaze as being like kind of retarded, which is, you know, I think that was much more of a trope back then, which was the idea of like the sweetly simple person.
Yeah.
You know,
even that word, right? I mean, it's not as far as Jen probably knows because you're a teacher. I don't think that's like the term for that you would use.
We don't use that word anymore.
My mom was a special ed teacher for a long time when I was in elementary school, and that was like what you said back then. And but I think with that did come these connotations of, you know, I remember an uncle being like, we need to pray for those people at night because that, you know, and not that it's bad to have compassion for people who have a disability, but there was this kind of like simpleton sympathy, if that makes sense, that I actually think reduces the person rather than acknowledging that they too can have complexities. And I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, no, I'll just say, because obviously King is drawn to this trope. He's used it with Tom Cullen. He's used it in other books too, I think. But he's not alone. I mean, this was a very, very, very common trope. I think that there is, obviously this is something that people within the disabled community have railed against in later years. I know, like the actor and filmmaker Crispin Glover, who I love, he self-funded like basically a trilogy of films. The third one is still in development, and they star by and large people with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, and he wanted them to be able to tell their own stories, because I think after he did that movie, he's in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which is a very good movie, and Leonardo is very good in it, but he was very disturbed disturbed by the ways that people lauded awards on Leonardo for playing a character like that. I think that movie was kind of a wake-up call for him as an actor, that he found something kind of repugnant about the way that Hollywood treats people with disabilities. And so he made these movies where, like his second movie, it's called It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine. It's not for the weak-hearted. It is an intense movie, but he collaborated with a guy with cerebral palsy, and that guy wrote a script. And in that script, it's like plays out series of fantasies where he plays a crooked detective and he like kills people, and he has full penetrative sex with multiple women in the movie. And this is all, it's like, and the whole point was to essentially show that the guy was trying to say, yeah, just because I don't operate, cognitively like the rest of you, I feel the same urges. I feel the same resentment, anger, horniness, all these things. I am a fully well-rounded human. And he wanted to play a villain in a movie. That was kind of the whole point. And I think that, I'm certainly not condemning King for this at all. It was just, I think, a pretty easy trope back then. If you wanted instant sympathy from an audience, you sort of made your character, and I mean, forgive me for being crude, but I think about Tropic Thunder, right? Where they say you never go full retard. Like it's a crude joke, and forgive the language, but it is true. Like that is the thing, is it is a very cynical ploy to draw easy sympathy, I think, from audiences. And again, like I said, certainly not condemning, saying King is wrong for this or anything. It was a different time. People were operating, art was a lot different back then. Is there an insensitive quality to it? Of course, but I don't think that there was any malicious intent.
And I do think, what I was going to say before is that, yeah, we've seen this with characters like Tom Cullen. Well, I was going to say Duddits, which maybe not a good example of that, but King has these, for lack of a better word, the simpleton archetype. And I actually do think for the most part, he toes that line really nicely. Like I think Tom Cullen is
Tom's a great character.
And what one of you said before about, we don't maybe get to know as much about Blaze's internal world and psychology. I still like Blaze as a character. I think he has a lot going on, but we don't dive into him as deeply as we do with someone like Tom Cullen. So I do think, even though it's a trope that maybe he wouldn't lean into as much today, I think he has a good history of making those characters somewhat complex and while also being compassionate toward them. Jen, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think I don't know, have a character like Blaze is a way of like having your character interact with the world without implicating your character in the worldliness. I think about like Forrest Gump, but here, like we see like Blaze has to retreat from the world. So I feel like it's almost more of an indictment. And I think King makes him more of a human character than I've seen a lot of other stories make a Blaze type character. Like I think about Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, where he is just kind of floating through, and the story becomes about how people are treating him. And I think we see a little bit of that, but we see that Blaze really can't be a full human in the world. He has to remove himself from the world, which I think is a darker read of it than something like Forrest Gump, where it's like, I'm just going to be fine if I keep floating through. Like I watched that recently, and as much as I love that movie, like it's interesting
Tough
to watch it through through the lens of 2023. But I feel like Blaze, the stereotype or the archetype itself is dated, but I feel like Blaze as a character kind of rises above that. I don't know if it rises all the way to the top. Like he's not Invisible Man, but he is a lot better. Like I think he's a better written character than somebody like John Coffey.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it's actually the only character that really came to mind, because he's clearly more intelligent, at least emotionally intelligent, than maybe Forrest Gump. But there's a movie called Goon with Sean William Scott.
Sean William Scott, yeah.
And I really like that movie, but he's a hockey enforcer, but he kind of acknowledges right away. He's like, yeah, I know I'm not smart, but he has like a good heart. And I always like the way, I'd never really seen that character portrayed like that. And there were elements of Blaze that I could see that, where it's like, yeah, he kind of is in unfortunate circumstances, but he does have a good heart at the end of the day. The one thing that kind of confused me, because I was waiting to see if there was like a supernatural aspect with George, because he'll be like, what would George do? And then George will problem solve in his head, but you're like, that's still Blaze coming to the solution, right? In his own mind. But I was like, in the beginning, I just wasn't sure if George was like leaning in and directing him, but it is Blaze solving a lot of these problems. He'd be like, well, what would George say? He'd be like, don't
Yeah.
do that, dummy. Make sure you do that. And he'd be like, right, George. But it is Blaze that's solving the problem at the end of the day. He's just trying to think, how would George
and I
do
think
it?
that's sort of like that passage I read about like the burnt out nature and then
Yeah.
what's operating below.
It's-
I think that's like that.
It's like the
The,
latent intelligence that he has probably from
right
before he was shoved down the stairs.
But he's like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have thought of that, but George did. It's like, but you did think of it, even if it was through a proxy of George. But in the beginning, because this was the first time I had read this novel, and I was waiting. I was like, is there this supernatural element or is it just his memory of George?
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, and I think it does speak in some ways to those themes about him, taking ownership of his own
Yeah.
life, or finding freedom from all these people who have sort of relegated him to sidekick status, or used him, or abused him, or hurt him. Like he's, by caring for someone else, he is sort of, able to embrace himself fully and acknowledge that, no, I am the one having these thoughts. I know what's best for this child. I know what I can do to get out of here, so on and so forth. I guess I think my heart bled the most for Blaze, I think during that farm sequence, because you see how much he really comes to life once he has something he's good at. Like, and even with chopping the wood at the Bowie farm, like he realized he was good at that, but he wasn't appreciated for that work. And it was also like one monotonous task, right? Whereas at the farm, he was able to serve, multiple things. He was driving the truck. He was helping people carry stuff. He was like organizing, like he ended up serving multiple functions there. And he seemed so happy doing it. And I think that to me was probably the most moving part of it, because you see how useful it is when someone finds something they're good at, or something that makes them feel useful. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and I think that that's honestly what so much of us are looking for in life generally, is just to feel useful. And so I don't know. I think that was the part where I really locked into that character, because it was him being like, oh, I actually am good for something. And that was, I don't know, it was really lovely.
Yeah, there's the line where I almost put it in my word processor section, but like where he says, I'm going somewhere. And then he says, I am somewhere. And he almost starts crying. And it's like, I'm not just waiting in this house to have a life that I'm never going to have anymore,
Yeah.
Because that's what makes you a human, is doing something and relating to other people and understanding that. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on Blaze? Any other thoughts on any other characters? I mean, this isn't like a character-rich story.
I think we've talked enough about George. He's fairly, well, I shouldn't say he's one-dimensional, because, like I said, him and John, I think, are two sides of the same coin, showing the compassion toward Blaze. I just thought it was funny that King really doubled down throughout that George is a Democrat. Just because,
I know that was
about to say, exactly.
And honestly, not because, I'm not even tying it to like King's own ideology so much, just that I feel like criminals like that, man, are almost like nihilists usually, or like apolitical, or would just like hate the man. It was so funny to me. He's like, yeah, I want to see that Reagan out of the White House. It was just funny to me. I didn't even dislike it. It was just like,
it was almost like King was speaking to us. Yeah.
Yeah. I was almost like, I don't think this guy would even mention. I think he would just have a disdain for politicians in general. So I just thought that was.
He's like, don't even get me started about austerity. Blaze.
It was an odd little character quirk that I wasn't sure fully worked, but it made me laugh every time it came.
He's like, I think that Carter gets a bad rap for how he handled the hostage situation. He was very good. He was good. Anyway,
he's like, Blaze, you got to understand about some supply side economics here.
It's trickle down bullshit. Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. But I like George. He was funny.
Yeah, he's okay. I preferred the version of him in 11/22/63.
I probably, maybe I'd feel differently if I heard Ronald McCart. What's his name? McClarty?
Ron McClarty. Yeah, he's like, hey. I mean, you're probably fine without hearing it. He did a great job reading this book, except for that one thing. I wanted to talk about Joe for just a minute, because we've seen King write a lot of child characters, but we don't see him write babies that often. Like, I'm thinking about the twins in The Dark Half is really the only other kind of this age child. And I enjoyed the way he wrote Joe, but he also didn't he didn't overdo it. The baby felt like a human baby, felt like somebody who has raised children, and that knows what babies are like. But this one paragraph I just loved. It's on page 56. Blaze was stunned at how much it took to keep one tiny scrap of human being up and running. He had considered his take from the beer store to be quite respectable, but he left Planet Baby with a nearly flat wallet. And I just love that. Just encapsulates parenthood, I think. You're like, man, how much shit do you need for this kid? You know?
Yeah.
And you got to watch him every second. So I really enjoyed the Blaze learning to parent element of this story.
I will say that, of course, made me think of Raising Arizona again, when he's like stealing diapers and baby formula when the stocking, and then when the neighbor lady is like, you got to get the dip tat. It's so good.
He also just handled, and once again, I know this now because I'm currently raising a baby myself, but I feel like he got the details of changing and like, well, which I learned today, keeping your hand on the fucking changing table when you're
you grease that baby's ass down.
Yeah, what'd you say?
You grease that baby's ass.
Yeah, you know
That's
exactly.
such a weird line.
Yeah, it was a little chestnut of a line for it, but no, but he actually got the detail. I mean, because King at that point had what 2-3 kids maybe, so I appreciated it's the first book I've read, I think, since having Boone that goes into details about caring for an infant, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that is how you do that. So I appreciated the what do they say it? What's that word? Verisimilitude of childcare.
Me and Dan felt seen by this book.
Exactly. Yeah, I felt seen by Blaze. I mean, it's still bad. He still kidnapped a kid. Like that's
true. Yes,
that's just Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
But no, I like the way the baby was portrayed, because a thing in the 80s that always jumped out to me and my brothers would watch a movie and the baby, it'd be like Willow, for example, and they're like, running out an avalanche, and the baby's like, ha, like, and we're like, the baby likes it. Like, brothers were like, the baby thinks it's exciting. And, as a stupid kid, I thought that was so cool. And I'm happy that it didn't, as the shootout was happening, the baby didn't like peer up and like give a big smile or something, because that would have been so silly.
Thanks, but yeah.
But Laura liked it in Willow.
I have a thing about the baby as well, but I'm going to hold it for a little place called the cemetery, which speaks to how I feel about babies. Just kidding. Do you guys have anything else for characters, or should we move on to a little section we call misery?
Let's do it.
All right, misery time.
She died. She just slipped away.
Slipped away! Slipped away! She didn't just slip away! You did it! 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 You murdered my misery!
Annie!
All right, here in Misery, we talk about the stuff that made us miserable. I'll kick us off. Page 29, Dinkleballs. Of all the insults, Dinkleballs. I can't fuck with Dinkleballs. It's used twice.
Nobody should fuck with Dinkleballs.
No, I do not fuck with Dinkleballs. What do you guys got?
I have him calling Ronald Reagan old white Elvis daddy. It's like,
he added that. That's a King 2007 edition.
Well, it's funny too, because and I honestly really don't have much for Misery. Like I said, the sort of backloading of George, which was a bit of a problem for me, but I think for the most part, King succeeds in making this, how do you say it in the forward? Like, it takes place in the recent past or whatever.
Yeah.
I think he does a pretty good job of that. And I guess Ronald Reagan technically is in the recent past, but I think it's just best to avoid proper nouns, like proper cultural nouns when you can, if that's what you're going for. I have no problem with him making this like a somewhat timeless book and just having it feel in a generic kind of era. I think that he actually succeeds for the most part. But when he talks, like Elvis is one thing, because Elvis was, even if it was in the 50s, right, that would work. But yeah, there were a couple of instances, and Reagan was one of them, where it's just like, I think we hear about X-Men comics, although X-Men came out in the 60s, so, but still, even X-Men feels like a little too recent to even reference, so just, there were a couple of moments like that. I mean,
when you start talking about James Marsden as Cyclops, it was just weird.
King's Dominion, though. Let's do.
It's true.
He's like, why did Phoenix end on a train when it should have been in outer space? I was gonna say one character that I got, not misery, but I was getting frustrated, but I understand that was the place, was the owner of I think her name was like Nancy Maldo or Debbie, the woman who owned the baby store.
Oh yeah.
When the cops were asking her questions, and when I used to do like client intake, sometimes you had to ask to get the facts down, like what happened. But people will always try to like add details that you don't need. And she was an example where they're like, do you have a video of that? And they're like, no, but we've been talking about installing cameras. In fact, and it's like, I just want to be like, lady, just answer the question.
Yeah.
Let the cop do his job. But it's like, I was getting a little frustrated. But she did
That's
say
just some
laws.
real king.
She
That's
said
some real
laws.
king. Oh yeah, laws. Yeah,
she said laws, yes. So I got to give her some credit. So.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's just some real king supporting character energy where it's like, all right.
Yeah.
I have under misery. Here's where I talked about the names earlier. The name that made me laugh was Hanky. Like there was Moochie, Georgie, and then Hanky. And I'm like, not everyone needs the IE at the end of
Right,
it. Like,
right.
We call my dog Hanky,
Yeah,
like
he's
Hanky
a
Panky,
Hanky.
but if he was a gangster,
Aw.
I don't think we'd call him that. Like,
I'd
Hanky.
respect him. I'd call him
Probably
Big
get your
Hank
ass
or
kicked if
something.
you call him Hanky.
Reckon
you know?
you get your ass kicked. You talk
Hank
like
the
that.
Tank or something.
Like if
that.
I'm getting like gangster names, I need like like Baloney Thomas or something. I don't want like
Tony two times.
Everyone, I don't need everyone to have like an IE at the end of their name.
Yeah.
Like it's just it just made me laugh. I'm like, you can be a little more creative here, like Salvatore Hamburgers or something.
Sally Hams.
Sally Hams. Yeah, there we go. And then like I just had like he hadn't really learned how to write action yet, at least in my opinion. Like even the ending, like the whole chase, it felt a little blurry to me. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't as well defined as I think a lot of King action sequences would come in the future. And again, I'm well documented for also being like, you don't need to overwrite action sequences, aka the raft scene in The Talisman, the longest section King has ever written. But in this case, I'm like, he's still lacking a little, I think, clarity in terms of writing some of these action set pieces. That was at least the truth for me. Any other misery before we move on?
I have one more, and it's kind of, and I don't know if I really blame King for it because this was written in the 70s, but there's like a dated offensiveness to it, like using the word retarded, and I wrote some old spick chick, which is a quote from the text too. And I mean, I'm not saying he should have changed it because I feel like that would have felt like these Roald Dahl books being changed now, but it just bothered me. It just was something that kind of kept pinging. Like he's just using words that we don't
For
use
you,
anymore,
it didn't like enhance character or story.
It didn't really. I could have done without it. Like maybe not updating it to like PC terms, but like I don't know, just let him.
This pleasant Latino woman.
But nobody gets it wrong because he's like, they refer to an Armenian as that word. And he's like, I thought only Italians could be that, which just shows like how silly he can't even get like the racism right.
Yeah. He hasn't learned how to write racism yet.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But, no, I was gonna say not misery, but I actually wanted to see more of that bartender shop owner that sold them the steaks.
I like that guy.
I like that guy. And then he comped them the meal, and I was like, man, I don't know. I just thought like he's like, I need you to come back in a few years. I want to see how big you're gonna turn out. And I was like, I like this guy.
Yeah, see, that's a great example
brother,
of King just being able to write these really great one-off characters. It's obviously something he would flex a lot. I mean, he would flex a lot like a year later in Salem's Lot. It's so wild to me because like I think Salem's Lot is so fucking fantastic. And when just like, and I'm not saying like this is not a good book or that road work is horribly written, which I don't think it is. It's just like Salem's Lot is like leaps and bounds to me ahead of these, which is, it's so interesting that I still like, I know we brought this up earlier, but I still laugh at the idea of him handing those two manuscripts over and somehow not thinking Salem's Lot was the one. Maybe he was just like really insecure about it being like such a Dracula ripoff, you know what I mean? Which I think is fine if you tell a story as well as he tells it in that. So, okay, let's move it along to Word Processor of the Gods.
And we're gonna make a new rule. Whenever I'm in here, you hear me typing. Or whether you don't hear me typing, what the fuck you hear me doing in here, when I'm in here, that means that I am working. That means don't come in. Now, do you think you can handle that?
Yeah.
Fine. Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here?
Okay, here we talk about the good writing, the stuff we really liked. Caffrey, kick us off, since this is your favorite King book of all time.
Look, man, it's up there. Not favorite all time. Okay, so I'm not going to read the bird section. We talked about it enough. But I will read, because I think we talked a lot about, how much is he playing with, how much is he elaborating on a genre, and how much is he just paying homage to it. And I think this is a section that does both quite nicely. Okay, so this is on 236 of the first edition. Let me bring it up. It's I'm just laughing because it has Hanky Melcher in there, but it's just going into George's history. He was a bright and bitter boy. Experience taught him things that losers like Hanky Melcher would never learn. George and 3 older acquaintances, he did not have pals, stole a car when George was 11, took a joyride from Providence to Central Falls, got pinched. The 15-year-old who had been behind the wheel went to the reformatory. George and the other boys got probation. George also got a monster whacking from the gray-faced pimp his mother was by then living with. This was Aidan O'Kelleher, who had notoriously bad kidneys, hence his street name, Pisser Kelly. Pisser beat on him until George's half-sister screamed for him to stop. Now, in there, we get Hanky Melcher, we get Pisser, or Pissy, whatever his name is.
Pisser's pretty good.
So we get some of these, gangster cliches or like tough guy dime store cliches, for lack of a better word. But then we also get these terms like, he was a bright and bitter boy, and then 3 older acquaintances, he did not have pals, gray-faced pimp. Like, those all feel very distinctly Kingian to me. Like, I know it's a small paragraph and not super consequential for the rest of the story, but
it's a lot of character, I think.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like it packs
detail.
it kind of when King's running on full cylinder or all cylinders in this novel, I feel like it's like that. It's kind of, it really does feel like him putting his own spin on the gangster genre. So I really appreciate that. But look, I love the last paragraph about the birds. I'll just say that. I don't have to read it, but it's great. Probably the best piece of writing.
What a loser.
Yeah, jeez. I feel like it's like Blade Runner at the end. It's like, maybe I'll dream. And you're like crying over the last line.
I love they do that.
The birds. Oh my God, King.
On South Park, they always reference that speech at the end of Blade Runner, but they'll like Cartman do it for something really stupid.
Jennifer Lopez hand,
yeah. Jennifer Lopez. I wonder if I'll dream he disappears. Anyway, that's mine.
I love the way he writes about his dad early on. Like, he actually tries to, like, he gives just enough of a wrinkle of humanity to his father, even for as abusive as he was. And I have 2 little sections here. His father did some protesting in the Freeport police station and more in several Freeport bars. He threatened to go to law in order to regain his son, but never did. He claimed to love Clay, and perhaps he did a little, but if so, his love was the kind that bites and burns. The boy was better off out of his reach. I love the bites and burns bit.
I did too. I had that pulled too.
Yeah, and then the letter. This like broke my heart. This was like one of the most moving things I think I read. And so this was a letter from his father. He said, once he had a letter from his father. Dear son, it said, well, how are you doing? I am fine. Working these days up in Lincoln rolling lumber. It would be good if the bastards didn't steal all the overtime. Ha! I am going to get a little place and will send for you once I do. Well, write me a little letter and tell your old pa how it goes. Can you send a photo? It was signed with love, Clayton Blaisdell. And then a lot of the words are like weirdly capitalized or spelled wrong. And it's one of those letters that's so heartbreaking because it sounds so nice, right? It sounds like so simple and so sweet. And there's this like, juvenile quality to the way that it's manifested, but like, enough about this character to know that it's all bullshit, right? Like, it's not that he doesn't mean it. He probably means it in that moment. Like, he's in this, like, one day he's feeling like intense longing and misses his son, but then the next day he's going to get drunk and forget all about it. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. And I think he captures that melancholy and that essence of it. And just like the idea that then he says that like the letter didn't even have a return address on it or anything. So he would have no idea how to mail him anyways. So that to me was deeply tragic and very sad and very lovely, I think. So
well, and even in that letter, the anger creeps in because he's like, it's the stupid right. So I think he really captured that character in just a few short sections too.
Mm-hmm. What do you got, Jen?
I have 2. I pulled the same one, the love that bites and burns. I just loved that. But this is maybe my favorite sentence in the whole book. And it's talking about Anne Bradstay. And ordinarily, I probably would criticize this book for a lack of female characters, but it's such a character study, and it's I think it is about masculinity that it doesn't bother me. But I love on page 245, he is describing Anne, and he writes, she was not a bruised girl with a heart of gold, only a bruised girl. And something about that, I just loved it. And it kind of like what we were talking about earlier about Clay, like, or Blaze, like, he is allowed to have flaws, you know, and
Right.
like the bruised girl with a heart of gold is like an inhuman trope. It's
Yeah.
not a human being, and I feel like Anne gets to be a human, you know,
Yeah.
even
He
though we
allows
don't
her
spend
an
much time
edge.
with her.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that too. That whole section, the virginity, like him losing his virginity to her section, the tenderness of it, but also the humor and
Yeah.
the I like when he talks about sentimentality, I imagine King had even more sort of like there's already a little bit of like the moon, the sky, you know, everything.
Yeah.
But he allows there to be enough sort of quote unquote, and I say this like in a good way, enough like ugliness, like enough like
Yeah.
dirtiness and enough edge to it that I think it really does work. And I imagine that's maybe a section that King maybe spruced up a little bit on the rewrite because he keeps a little bit of that longing and the sweetness, but then he also adds like enough muddiness to it that I think gives it a real lovely edge. Flieger, how about you?
I'm a sucker whenever there's like a Yankee character. So I forget the name of the guy, the one who owns the farm.
Blue Note.
What's his name?
Blue Note.
Blue
and I
Note.
know that because
Yes,
my
Blue
high
Note.
school show choir was the Blue Notes.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
You know, it's a little gin dominion.
I was thinking of the rapper Blueface when I was reading it.
Oh.
But he
Blue
has
beard.
like quote before like the town people, and I'll try to do it here with my Yankee, but it's like, ain't none of you ever been stuck in the mud, needed a push? I won't ask you how you came to be for this and still call yourselves Christians, because not one of you would have said the kind of answer out what I call the Holy Joe Do It My Way Bible. But Jeezly Crow, how can you read the parable of the Good Samaritan on Sunday and then say you're not for the thing on Monday night? And I kind of like that idea of like stuck in the mud, need a push.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I
like a
love
very
that.
like good way of phrasing it, and this will sound stupid, but when I was reading that, I was thinking of that Jimmy Buffett song "Fruitcakes," because he mentions the big difference between Saturday night and Sunday morning, and
Mm.
I think Blue Note really captured what Buffett was trying to say there.
Well, he also says like he also says like I want to just show him what the world can be and then what
Yeah.
they do with it. Like I loved that character.
He was almost like too good for this world with like
Right.
Right,
being
yeah.
angelic, like he's like flawless.
he's gotta
character.
die, you know?
And that's the thing is like you knew it, and it was that thing of
Yeah.
like it reminded me even like Gladiator when it's like I'm gonna make you the king, and then he dies before he can actually announce it.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, if somebody is going to adopt me, if someone's going to do something good, I am singing it loud and proud as soon as I can for as many witnesses, because I do not ever want to be in a situation like that where, you know, Blaze would have had a good life there. This guy saw something in
Yeah.
him. And it's just so sad that it wasn't meant to be. But I would like to think if I had a farm like that, and I like that he was very honest with the kids too, of, you know, yeah, I am making money off you, but here's exactly how much I'm making.
Mhm.
And very few adults in these kids' lives had ever been like that sort of honest and upfront with them. And I feel like Blueface and the bartender / butcher guy, those were the two like angels on earth that would have been a good father figure for Blaze in some other life.
Yeah.
Kath, how about you?
What for word processor of the gods for more of it? I think just no. I'm not gonna give you guys the pleasure of reading the birds and make it.
Aw.
Tweet.
Oh, sure. No, I'm gonna do it. Yeah.
Can I do one quick one too?
Yeah, do it.
Go ahead,
This
Fligger.
is short, but the memories are contrary things. If you quit chasing them and turn your back, they often return on their own.
Ooh.
Yeah, I love that.
like
I think I wrote that down too. I love this little section because it made me laugh. This is when all the boys are meeting at the farm. Conversations began. They were awkward at first, but became more natural. When the trucks hit field bumps, everyone laughed. There were no formal introductions. Sally Ann Robichaud had Winston's and shared out the pack. Even Blaze, sitting on the end, got one. One of the ballbusters from South Portland began discussing girly books with Toe Jam. It turned out that this fellow, Brian Wick, just happened to have come to the Blue Note farm equipped with a pocket-sized digest called Fizzy. Toe allowed that he had heard good things about Fizzy, and the two of them worked out a trade. The girls managed to ignore this and look indulgent at the same time. I love that. And I just loved, he'd heard good things about Fizzy.
It is funny because the more we're reading these very noir kind of graphs out loud, it reminds me of Angels with Dirty Faces or whatever from Home Alone. The AC said you had some dough, and like we all kind of go into that voice. I'm gonna read this last page. Or this
AC
last...
said 10%.
Yeah, Snake, is that the guy's name? That's
Oh,
right.
I don't know snakes.
I'm just gonna read the very end here, and
Yeah,
not just
let's
not
do
just
it. We
because I
won't
want
chuckle
to.
the whole time.
But for real, I actually do think it plays into some of the status themes we were talking about. Okay.
Mhm.
So Joe Gerard Ford lay behind plate glass in the hospital crib. He was well again. His mother and father would be back this very day to take him home, but he didn't know it. He had a new tooth and knew that it hurt. He lay on his back and looked at the birds over his crib. They were on wires and flew whenever a breath of air stirred them into motion. They weren't moving now, and Joe began to cry. A face bent over him and a voice began cooing. It was the wrong face, and he began to cry louder. The face pursed its mouth and blew on the birds. The birds began to fly. Joe stopped crying. He watched the birds. The birds made him laugh. He forgot about wrong faces, and he forgot the pain of his new tooth. He watched the birds fly. That line about he forgot about wrong faces, that's interesting to me because I feel like, and maybe this is me being a little hokey, but I feel like it gets at this idea of imagining a world where status and circumstance do not exist. Like forgetting about wrong faces. It's like, no, there are no wrong faces, right? Like someone like Blaze is not a wrong face. He was just born in the wrong world or the wrong time or whatever. And so for me, it does, I mean, maybe it's cheesy to say that it's a message of harmony, but I feel like it kind of ends on this. Yeah, when we take away all these circumstances, I mean, maybe we all do have strengths that can get us through life. So, but I think it's a very lovely way to end the book.
Well, the wrong face too. I mean, it's because he has that like dent in his head, right? So it's like there's something physically wrong as well. So I think you're totally right in what you're saying. And Dan, it's lovely. I didn't mean to degrade it.
And do you think the bird was Randall Flagg?
It's a crow, yeah. It's a crow.
Well, okay, but I had a question because does it ever specifically say that it's Blaze that he sees? Because what I read that as it was like a nurse or a caretaker, and it was the wrong face because it wasn't Blaze, and that's who he wanted to see over his crib. Right?
It's funny because when I read it just on my own, I thought it was Blaze, and then rereading it this time, I thought it was supposed to be a more literal like character. I like that too because we were talking about whether it's mystical or not, and I like that it kind of leaves it open for that. Like maybe it's just a nurse or a caretaker and he's remembering Blaze, or maybe it's actually him seeing Blaze and Mother Abigail.
Yeah Mufasa. Yeah
Go ahead, Jen.
Sorry. I have one more, and it's the Mr. Blue Note again on page 249. A man gets older. That's the thing. You don't know nothing about that, but you will. He gets older and his whole life starts to seem like a dream he had during an afternoon nap. I just love that. And like, as you were reading like the part on the truck, it just like, you start smiling when you hear that, you know, it's just like, it's infectious. And like when they go on the trip to Boston, it's like infectious too. And I feel like that's a little bit of King, like remembering writing this and thinking like that, man, I really got some happy moments into this really depressing book. And it's just really nice. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Speaking of not so nice things, we're going to go to the cemetery.
What's the bottom of the truth?
Well, sometimes that is better. The person you put up there ain't the person that comes back. It may look like that person, but it ain't that person. Because whatever lives in the ground beyond that cemetery ain't human at all.
Here in the cemetery, we talk about the scary stuff. I have two, not a particularly scary book, but I will say there is a scene, and I'm mad at myself because I didn't write down the page number, but it reminded me of a quote that King had in that Penthouse interview. I believe he did in 1982, which we discussed on an Archives episode, Jen. And he talked in that episode about anger he felt like when he was writing The Shining and what he drew upon for The Shining, where he would get so angry at his kids because they wouldn't stop crying, and he would feel there would deep within him there was this darkness that was like, what if I could make them shut up? You know, it's not anything he ever would have acted on. It's something he probably only said because he was on cocaine during that interview. But it's like, it's that transgressive sort of quality that people never talk about, which is those moments when you are like furious at your child. And he said he really drew on that for The Shining with Jack's character, which is very accurate. But there is a moment in Blaze where I think there is that moment where I can't remember exactly the context of it, but where Blaze is essentially like, I could kill this child. Like I could kill it with one hand. Like I could wrap my hand around its throat and kill it. And that to me was like extremely dark and extremely distressing and very like, and because I think of the word transgressive because when we interviewed King, that's what he talked about was that idea of transgressive horror. Like what is taboo? And that to me is like a very taboo sort of thing to even put it on the page. You know what I mean? So I definitely got to
real, you know, and I appreciate seeing that. And I feel like a lot of writers or like, that was what I loved. That's what I love about young King is he will go there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys have?
I don't, man. I honestly don't have anything for the cemetery. I love this book, but I wasn't really scared by it at all.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, that cover's pretty scary. Driving into that mansion and
the Marston house.
Yeah, that's what it looks like on the front. Yeah,
Fleeger, do you got
I don't have anything?
Because like as it was going on, I was nervous that there might be like a sexual assault that would occur, and it seemed like some of the laws, you know, they call them like the law, like these sort of like the guys that run it. I was like, are we gonna get into that? And I'm happy they didn't, but there was like this unease. Luckily, it was just physical abuse. I mean, it's terrible.
Luckily,
I know, but that's what's so sad is like.
Oh no, I know what you mean though. Yeah.
Like
I had that too. Yeah.
Sleeper shit.
It felt grimy to me in a way like, and it was, I mean, not scary, but I mean terrifying in real life. You know, like I just had this unease during some of those passages, and I was happy to be out of the boys' home after a while. I just think like that's so.
King's great at writing like really terrifying boys' homes.
Yeah, like
obviously
Sunshine
about
for
the
boys.
talisman.
I have a fear of being institutionalized. Like I know that's like a silly thing, but I've always like the idea of like being forced into an institution, whether it's a jail or mental, is like terrifying to me. And so like any sort of these like reformatory schools or halfway houses. So like when Blaze did have that chance to live on the farm, you're like, oh my God, just please, like I wanted him to have it so bad because that's exactly like I was reading that and I was like, I want to go chop wood. Like this sounds so like invigorating and refreshing and good for him. And so no, it was just there's a sense of unease. It's not really a scary novel again at all, but sort of the circumstances become this almost like
it just sounds like hell.
Yeah, it just becomes like. Ugh.
How about you, John?
I have two, and one of them was that scene where the cause law is like, you had not to strop me, and it's longer and I won't read it, but there's just this feeling of powerlessness that I found really upsetting. Like, and it's kind of like what you were saying, Dan, is like when you're there's nothing you can do and you can't reason with this person. He's always going to hold his petty little grievance against you because you're not who he wants you to be in the body that you have, which is just, I don't know. It's just frustratingly helpless, you know?
And I think people were like sizing him up based on his like enormous size and potential power. So there's almost like the men felt like they had to immediately like cut him down to like restate their own masculinity or something.
Exactly.
And he's like, you know, what's that? The Ferdinand the Bull? Like he just wants to smell the flowers. He's not interested in being a fighter, but they see him and they're like, all right, big boy, I'm going to like, you might kick my ass, but I'm going to beat you down every way possible. And I just hate that he had to go through that.
I'm going to use the strength I can find against you, which is that I know that you are mentally challenged and cannot, so that's the power I hold over you, and I'm just going to hold it with an iron fist.
The only other thing I had was there were times, it's not that I thought that obviously the George voice was real, but the way it's described at times is that it's always coming from other rooms, like in the house, you know? Then he doesn't see him, which I really like. That the idea that the voice existed just wherever was, you know, like out of sight from where Blaze was very unnerving.
Yeah, and not that, and I guess they only confirmed it once. I think it was when he was hitchhiking. Somebody called him out for saying in like a George voice. So I was like, okay, so every time, has he been hearing this, or is it a combination of him vocalizing it and not realizing it? I was waiting for that revelation, and then when it happened to, I wasn't like, oh, I don't think it's enough to say he's always been speaking out loud but I think when you say like a voice from another room, I think it's just echoing around, and sometimes he says it in George's voice, sometimes he hears it in another room.
Yeah.
I'll say there was a real like dread that I felt when he was in because you mentioned this, Fleeger, like when he's in the truck with that one guy and he mentions something and then like raises like suspicion that he might be the one who took the kid. Like that scene to me was really, really suffused with dread because I was worrying this was going to be like you guys know Simple Plan, the Scott Smith book. Like
I thought it was pop punk band.
French Canadian. Yeah.
I'm just a kid. Like that it reminded me of A Simple Plan, like just the escalation of one thing leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. Like one crime is never it. Cause like if you want to keep the lid on it, you have to commit many crimes. It's like the plan is not so simple. And that to me I was so worried that he was going to have to kill that guy in the truck. And I'm so glad he didn't. Yeah. But I was left with that feeling of like, is this going to keep escalating
and
for him?
He was ramping up to do it also. And the guy's like, want another cigarette? You're like, oh my God, the guy's giving him cigarettes. Like, don't kill him. He's so nice.
And then if he had, he would have said, I made my mistake.
What happened to Blaze?
But to your point, Dan, I think a thing about the book that works is that I did believe he would kill that guy in that minute, because like the book did, as sympathetic and as that character is, we did always feel like he was capable of violence, and it was like hitting that old woman in the house. He was capable of that still. So okay, cool. Let's fill ourselves up. Let's fill our bellies up with a little bit of pound cake.
After all you've been taught, everyone isn't bad, Mama. Everything isn't a sin. Come to your closet and pray. Ask to be forgiven. He's a nice boy, Mom. You like him. You really like him, Mama.
Okay, here in Pound Cake, we talk about the silly stuff, the stuff that made us chuckle, the poops, the farts, the boobs. Speaking of boobs, page 76.
I know what you're gonna say. I think.
Well, all I wrote down was boobs, and I forgot to. I didn't revisit this one, so let me see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, it just made me laugh. It was a very classic King thing where you can't like introduce a woman without looking at her breasts. It sounded strange coming from that mammoth breast, which rose under her plaid coat like a comber at Higgins Beach. Love it. Classic King. What do you guys got?
I've got I don't know. I feel like some people might think this passage is creepy. I don't, but it's when Blaze is changing Joe, and
the peen.
I thought it was a sweet, cute scene. I didn't read it as creepy, but he observed Joe's penis and felt instant delight. Not much longer than his thumbnail, but standing straight up. Pretty cute. That's quite a rod there. Yeah, no, that's quite a rod you got there, Skinner, he said. Joe left off crying to stare up at Blaze with wide, surprised eyes. I said, that's quite a rod you got on you. Joe smiled. Goo goo, Blaze said. He felt an unwilling idiot grin tug the corners of his mouth. Joe gurgled. Goo goo, baby, Blaze said. Joe laughed aloud. Goo goo, baby, Blaze said, delighted. Joe pissed in his face. Like, I don't know. I genuinely laughed during that scene.
That's a sweet little.
I thought it was sweet. I thought it was very funny. Yeah, but I cracked up at that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't leave them uncovered too long.
No, you can't. It's happened to me.
They'll pee right in your face. Yeah.
Quite a
one
rod.
time he Boone pissed when I got him out of the bath. He pissed all over the towel that I was drying him with, and it really was. Yep. It felt like a Fairley Brothers movie. Just like, oh fuck that, yeah. Just trying to cover it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Can I say?
Can't stop it.
Or Fleeger, what do you got?
Just a quick one. I didn't write down too much of this smut that you guys seem to get off on, but there was a turn of phrase that Caffrey would always say when we were growing up, and cold as a witch's tit.
Oh yeah.
You had like a fake band called Witch's Tit, I believe, or something.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
But,
yeah, that's
so whenever that phrase does come up, I'm always like, decaf. There you go.
No, it's funny. I heard the first place I heard that phrase, which I still remember today, is that horror movie, Lady in White, or is it Woman in White? The Woman in White, yeah. Because he's hanging out with those bullies, and I remember they're trying to like ingratiate them. It's like little Lucas Haas, and he's hanging out with these bullies, and the one to like. I don't know, to like be friendly with him, he's like, look, it's cold as a witch's tit outside. Like, and I just thought that was such a funny phrase as a kid.
I'll always remember it from the outtakes of, I think, Grumpy Old Men. There's like a bunch of outtakes of Burgess Meredith just like saying various filthy things, which was funny. And one time he's like, it's colder than a witch's titty. Which
it's fun. It's Halloweenish. I love it. It's a great phrase.
Page 268. Of my edition.
Oh, I got this one, yeah.
The sheets were perfectly white and clean, even though Johnny had been an enthusiastic lights-out masturbator. Many nights Blaze lay in his own bed, looking up into the dark and listening to the soft creak of the springs as JC flogged his doggy.
I will say, though, what comes after that...
the stiff yellow sheets.
That's actually like a really effective. What afterwards, where he talks about getting sad about Jen. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I was just going to say, I was eating while I read that, and I almost puked. The stiff white jeans. But I agree. It's really like it's a touching way of him. I mean, not that kind of touching, but like it's an interesting way of remembering his friend.
Yeah, because it gets very
sort of thing.
It gets very mournful after that. But I mean, it is fun. Just the phrase. What was it again? A chronic. What do you call him? Not chronic.
An enthusiastic lights out masturbator.
Great Kingism.
I know. I love it. I've got a few others. His hair grew lushly on his crotch, which was just a very classic King phrase. And then, hold on. Do you have any others while I'm finding this page?
I've got an absolute ass full of shit on page 40.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And then I have one that I don't know if this is just different because I'm a girl, but on page 230, when he's talking about, besides, girls scared him. Going into a toilet stall at HH with Toe Jam's treasured copy of Girl Digest and beating off did him fine. Did him right when he was wrong. So far, he'd been able to tell from listening to the other boys, the feeling you got from beating off and the feeling you got from sticking it in stacked up about the same. And there was this to be said for beating off. You could do it 4 or 5 times a day. And I'm not saying that girls don't beat it, but it cracked me up.
I love it.
I also like there's a point where I didn't write down. He refers to a woman's breast as her cakes, which I thought
was really that was so gross to me.
Is it early pound cake maybe allusion?
Oh, like actual cakes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm at my parents' house and they have a lemon pound cake scented candle in their bathroom. I need to take a picture of it.
Ooh,
yeah,
better not be a nighttime furious masturbator. Yeah, light that candle.
Enthusiastic.
Most of these country preachers informed the boys that masturbation made you foolish, and risks of intercourse included a penis that turned black from disease and began to stink. I just love stink. There's a line in It's Always Sunny. I won't say the whole thing because it's relatively offensive, but they basically say, like, have sex until the room stinks, which is always a line that made me laugh really hard.
That's good.
Oh, I also love this. This just made me laugh in general. About actual intercourse, they had no idea because, as Toe once sadly observed, they only showed fucking in French movies. The only French movie they had ever seen was The French Connection.
That cracked me up.
That's a good bit.
I mean, Roy Schneider is kind of hot, but, you know.
I agree with that. I'm trying to see if I feel like I had one other. This is just where Blaze was getting horny looking at girls. I just like the sentence, Blaze watched them and started feeling horny. I started feeling horny. That's
a very you pull for pound cake, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a Colburn one.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one last one because this reminded me very vividly of the first, and I've told the story in the pod, the first King book I ever really read was one I mostly flipped through in my grandma's basement, and she had it. It was Christine. And I remember in Christine, there's a scene where one of the guys is like working at a gas station. He's reading like a porno book. And that was I was too young to really know what porno was. So I guess I did think that like you read it in a book. Like I didn't, and so, but then as I got older, I was like, that's weird. Like the idea of reading pornography books is just like, I guess that's what people do now. They read smut, but I guess like these were very explicitly marketed as like hardcore pornography. And, but there's a moment like that very early on in page 39, like, that little mom and pop store that he robs a bunch of times. The Nightman was a pimple-pocked dude who attended the blah, blah, blah. Let me see here. When the big man with the dented forehead walked in at 10 minutes of 1, Nason was reading a book from the paperback rack. The book was called Big and Hard. The late night rush had dried up to a trickle. Nason decided that after the big man had bought his jug or his 6, he'd close up and go home, maybe take the book along and beat off. He was thinking that the part about the traveling preacher and the 2 horny widows might be good for what the big man, when the big man put a pistol under his nose. And it's almost written the exact same in Christine. Like, like he's like, the guy's like, oh, the woman, he's like, I'm loving this book. The woman's fucked everyone except the mailman and the dog, and the mailman's right down the street and the dog's like at her feet right now. And so it was like, I remember it's like the same cadence, the way he writes it, which is very funny to me. So
there's
little
an
King's
interlude
Dominion
like
too.
that in Percy Wetmore is there's a section where he's reading something like that too, and he's got it like, I think it's like olive oil or something.
I bet King like found one or two of those when he was a kid and probably flipped through them.
The Tijuana Bible. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to our last section before our final thoughts, which is King's Dominion.
There's another world out there.
I know there is.
Here in King's Dominion, we talk about the connections to other King works. There's a handful in here, mainly because I imagine King didn't, or I imagine he either added them later or he ended up just reusing things because he never thought he would publish this. But I mean, we have some pretty big ones. There's a mention to Shawshank, the laundry. I believe it's not the same, but there is mention of working in a laundry. And then the big one is Martin Kozlaw. Where else have we heard this name, Martin Kozlaw, before? Do you guys know?
Cycle the Werewolf, right?
That's right. That's the name of the main boy. He loves to reuse names. We just talked about this with Cell because there's a character in Cell with the exact same name as a girl in Billy Summers.
Get ready for Doom McKee. There's a big one in that one too.
Yeah.
Reuse name.
What else you guys got?
I think not just in the forward, but in the book, don't they mention Second Coming, the vampire novel, right? Which is obviously the original title for Salem's Lot. That was the big one I caught.
It's a vampire movie called Second Coming. Yeah.
Or vampire movie. That's right. Yeah. That when they're going to the movies. Yeah.
There's references to Castle Rock. Obviously, we said My Laws. They reference a Saint Bernard dog.
Oh.
I didn't catch that.
The way that children feel safe around big creatures, for example, a Saint Bernard. And then this is maybe conspiracy, but when they talk about Blaze has the idea of like the house catching on fire and the smoke rising up to the beams.
Ooh.
Room 237.
Oh, I've got some Room 237 myself. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wait, hold on. I've got a few. I want to say though, Dan, page 9. I'm surprised you didn't grab this. Somebody says, God damn it, where is it? Well, let's just say somebody describes something as a dilly. And I know you love that from
Ralph Bretner.
Bretner.
A dilly of a meal, man. Peter Norton.
Something.
Peter Van Norton. Is that his name?
Norton. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a dilly of a meal. It's so funny. I never noticed that until like recently. I can't get.
Well, now whenever I see it in a King thing, I think of you. So I always have to write it down. Getting hit by a child, like getting hit by a truck. There's mention of that. So it made me think of Pet, or not even just a child, but like anybody, because Pet Sematary, and then also Fairy Tale, recent book. That's one of the plot lines as well. Somebody dying in that kind of accident. Page 132, the way that John was described, the way that he wrote stories for like other people, it reminded me a lot of the way King talks about how he wrote stories when he was a kid and on writing. Yeah. Just a very small one. There's mention of a character who is deaf and dumb, or at least he pretended to be deaf and dumb, I think at one point. And then later they talk about the idea of a character who has some kind of disability that God granted them a few extra inches in the pants. And that is also a thing that is said about Nick Andros, that he has a huge schlong because he, is deaf and dumb. Somebody's Adam's apple bobs like a monkey on a stick.
Oh, yeah.
Something he uses often. Mention of Ogunquit, Maine, which we would see in the stand. There's a Boole reference, Boole with an exclamation point. I imagine that was a latter-day ad since he had just been working on Lacey's story, and that was probably fresh in his mind.
I'm surprised he didn't say, oh, Boole, Boole, bad gunky to the baby or something.
Page 278, there's mention of a boogeyman. Mr. Boogeyman made his appearance. Okay, I'm in room 237 mode now. Are you ready for this, Dan? On page 304 in my edition, Hank says, George is a card. And who else was a card, Dan?
Oh, that was Harold Lauder. Real
That's
wild
right.
card. Yeah,
Real wild card.
Is that just in the movie or is that in the book also? I can't remember
I can't remember, but it's more iconic. It's more iconic in the movie because, like, the weird little Wolfman zombie or whatever calls him that in the dream, and it
like the one time
weird.
There's a puppet in the stand.
Very bizarre. Page 335, 336. There's talk. Yeah, Blaze began to walk out onto the ice. He got 9 steps before the ice broke. The ice is gonna break. Wish he had Johnny Smith there to warn him. Yeah. There's mention of Gates Fall, Maine and Harlow, Maine. Those are all places that popped up in later King stories, especially early ones. Gates Fall specifically, that was one of his first made-up towns. And then the end is a lot like Rage and Carrie, where it ends with a bit of correspondence, or at least, like, what is it here? It's a news report? Yeah, excerpt from a news conference. And Rage ends similarly with like a report, or it's like a letter from someone that was written. And then Carrie obviously utilizes that that trope quite a bit. It's interesting that was in so much of his early work and he moved on from it. But yeah. And then do I have any others? I think that's it. Yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
I have a couple. So he mentions Paul Hanscom, which is Ben Hanscom name. And then specifically Gerald Clutterbuck Realty of Castle Rock, Maine.
Yep.
And then an officer, this is a little bit thematic, but an officer breaks his leg stumbling on a deadfall. He wasn't looking straight ahead. Yeah.
Love
That's
it.
all I got.
All right. Any others before we give our nose rankings? Cool. Let's move to our final thoughts.
Dad, can we go now?
You ready?
Yeah, we've been ready for an hour.
Okay, I'll be right there.
You said that a half hour ago. Yeah, my dad's weird. He gets like that when he's writing.
Here in Final Thoughts, we share our final thoughts with a bright red Pennywise clown nose ranking, scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best book you've ever read. So Dan will clearly be giving it 5, and then and 0 if you are Justin and you just read the Tommyknockers. So Flieger, let's start with you. What would you give Blaze on a scale of 1 to 5?
As often happens, like discussing it with a group of people and such nice, smart people like yourselves, it makes me appreciate the novel more for what it is setting out to do. But I think compared to the greater King works, this just doesn't, again, feels half-baked. It feels unfinished. I totally understand why he would release this not under the King moniker. I would have to give this, I want to say 2.5 bright red Pennywise clown noses. Other than Roadwork, this is my least favorite of the Bachman novels, and I generally tend to really like those. So
nice.
Sorry, King.
Jen.
Bachman. I think I'm gonna go 3.5. Like, I really enjoyed reading this. I feel like he really doesn't overstay his welcome with this story. Like, I'm invested for most of it. There are a couple of flaws, but none of it really really takes me out of the book. And I find like that the tragedy hits me, like, it doesn't hit too hard, but it feels really, I don't know, deep. But also the happiness is really infectious. Like, there are some really, really joyful scenes. And I think that the balance of that, and then the almost comic tragedy, but not quite over the edge, like, makes it's just a really good balance of that. You know, it's like the sour makes the sweeter even sweeter. So yeah, 3.5.
Nice. Kath.
Exactly what Jen said. I think the tone of this book for me is just pitch perfect. As I said, I'm not saying it's King's best prose, but as far as writing in that kind of stripped down, economic, almost mechanized Bachman way, this really works for me. And I think that's because it is infused with a little bit of warmth, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of tenderness, and then vice versa. All of that gets balanced out nicely by the meanness of the book. Like, when I finish it, I think in my head, I'm saying, ooh, yeah, that's a little nasty, but it kind of made me think, but not too much. So I just really love it. It's a blazing good time every time I read it. What can I say? No, but once again, far and away my favorite Bachman book. I enjoy it more and more each time I read it. I'm going 4.5 bright red.
Wow!
Holy shit!
Yeah.
Jeez.
Love it.
I really like this book. My only complaint is the ending feeling rushed. I agree on that. And then George, the imbalance of the George storyline. But other than that, I think it's King doing crime really well, and it feeling like the Stephen King version of crime, rather than Stephen King trying to fit himself into the true crime genre, if that makes sense. So it's like he doesn't run away from his strengths, and at the same time he still tries to wear a new hat in this. So yeah, I'm a big Blaze fan. It's me, Dan, Blaze just being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
My whole life. I love it. 4.5 bright red Pennywise clown noses.
Awesome. Yeah, I really am quite charmed by this book. I think this is the kind of thing that King, I'm going to like go on a limb here. I think that this is the kind of book he maybe envisioned himself writing when he first started writing. Like he wanted to be this kind of writer, to publish these kind of dime store paperbacks, these digestible stories. But I almost feel like his ambition and his deep, deep wells of sort of empathy and emotion and all these things like really overwhelmed him in a sense. And his work became, you know, it blossomed into all these different areas, and I think took him places he didn't imagine he could go. I imagine he has a lot of love for this story because I think that it does evoke those books that he grew up reading. And I think that you do see the love in this story, which is why I think it doesn't really work for me as a Bachman book. But again, that's something we're going to talk about later this month a little bit more in depth. Whereas, but I can't help but feel that this book is a little slight, and that I think it does, and I like the way you phrased it down, which is the idea of like it emulates rather than innovates. I do think there are places where it innovates, absolutely. And there are sections that feel really inspired and really beautiful. The section on the farm specifically, the trip to Boston, all those things, the flashback specifically, the virginity scene, those are really, really lovely pieces of writing. But at the same time, like I said, there are moments where it feels a little, I don't know, corny or silly or slight, or it's reaching towards something that it's not quite grasping. I wouldn't say that I felt fully satisfied or satiated after I read this book, but I will say it reads quickly. It goes down smooth. It is, I think for somebody who is just getting into King, this might be a good one to recommend them, honestly. Like, I mean, it's not if they're like necessarily in it for the horror, but if they want something really quick and digestible, I think this is a really good one to recommend. It's also very likable, I think, in its own way, which again makes it almost very un-Bachman-y. So I don't know. I have an affection for it, but I'm going to give it 3 bright red Pennywise clown noses. And yeah, Blaze being Blaze.
Blaze being Blaze.
And
this is ratings wise, I feel like this is kind of one of the more all over the place books we've had. What does that average come out to, I wonder?
I'm not sure. I flunked pre-calc. Well, I got a D in pre-calc.
We got Blaze here on the podcast, I guess. Can't do
Look, we have my generous, wonderful score. We have
my
your
accurate
really
score.
Absolutely cruel score. No, I'm kidding. No, this was fun. I really enjoyed talking about this, and I don't think you're going to find this extensive of a discussion of this book anywhere else on the internet. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you stick around or join our Patreon, patreon.com/thebarons. We're going to be going deep into Bachman. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing a primer, sort of Bachman A to Z, and then we're also going to be ranking all of the Bachman books, including The Regulators and Thinner, which, you know, I don't know. I'm really excited to actually look at them as a whole, because I feel like my opinion on what is a Bachman book has changed from like the beginning of this podcast, like when we started in 2017 and first talked about Rage. Like, I think my memory of what a Bachman book is and how it's evolved after talking about all these books, and especially King's life. I mean, I think Blaze for me too is also really fascinating in the context of what we know about King's life at this time. I think I took a lot more out of it because of that than I would have if I didn't have that context. So I don't know. This was really fun. Stick around for that. We've also got a Dark Half commentary on the way, and I know we've got more. I'm blanking. We've been recording for several hours. Give me a break.
Yeah. We're ranking all of Stephen King's writers.
Oh yes, we're ranking all the writers. That's also going to be on the Patreon. So you're going to want to join the Patreon. It's pretty cool. So do you guys have any plugs you want to throw out before we wrap up?
Just Blaze being Blaze, yeah.
Just Blaze being Blaze.
All right, cool. Dan, anything Halloweenies you want to plug?
Oh man, what did we just? I never know when the schedules are.
Well, you've got Evil Dead Rise. I think this is coming out this week. So.
Yeah, which I wasn't on because the New York screening is not until next week, unfortunately. So yeah, so I know I have no idea how the guys felt about it. I've heard like solid things about it. I would be surprised if it's on the level of like Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness or anything. But yeah, I'm excited to see it. I think I'm going a week from tomorrow. So yeah, I'll be seeing it long after that. But yeah, Evil Dead Rise episode dropping, and then I think we're resuming our Chucky coverage after that, which I'm excited about. Because Chucky's he's a little motherfucker. I like that guy.
I love that little fucker.
I want a Child's Play version of Blaze because they're into doing multiple Chuckies on the show now. So we could get like a big good guy Chucky, and then we could have his little foul-mouthed counterpart.
I was going to say Blaze could be a good sidekick to Chucky in a different world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, just
do his
instead of
dirty work
George.
for him.
Yeah, instead of George, it's just Chucky for no reason.
Cool. Anything else, guys? Or should we log off? All right, let's log off with a long days and pleasant night. Bye, everyone.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
Got to bounce.
This is the end of our show. For now. Tune in next week. If you like our programming, consider searching for other Bloody Disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.